You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Then it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who take on my hate. Look me better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper than
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 9th part of What If Deku Helps His Best Friend, Peter Parker. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Until now, Ida Tenya had never truly understood the metaphor of calm before the storm. Obviously, it referred to the phenomena of differing thermodynamic pressures that signaled the coming of high winds and rains, but he never really saw it happen within the human context as well as he did now. Despite getting full reign of whatever food they wished from the cafeteria, the only one seemingly willing to dig in so to speak was Yaoyorozu, understandable given her quirk. Everyone ate their lunch normally or kept it within moderation. Nothing stopped them. In fact, it felt encouraging since 15 of his peers had made it into the tournament. However, Midoriya and Todoroki had yet to return from whatever talk that Todoroki insisted they speak about, and the support girl Hatsume had wandered off while muttering something about babies and hadn't returned. Shizaki never showed, and he didn't know the girl well enough to hazard a guess of what she was doing. Bakugo came back from something, but when asked he just said bathroom in a grouchy manner, and went about his business of eating. Now, Tenya would never stoop so low as to think that any of his fellow combatants were engaging in anything that would damage their chances going forward, but limiting themselves by going without nourishment before the main event was foolish. Tenya himself was busy ingesting ample amounts of orange juice for his engines. Facing off against Parker in the interim match, as well as the obstacle course had drained him far more than he expected. If he wished to perform at his peak, he would most likely have to pull off similar feats against his opponents as he did against Parker, though it hadn't been as effective as the boy had hoped. Even so, his opponents would most likely assume that he would repeat such a maneuver against them. If they focused on a frontal defense, it would simply leave them open to flanking maneuvers. Not going all out from the beginning may be the best plan of attack. Going forward, the Sweet 16, as Professor Mike so loudly declared from the booth, had been given a special room and cafeteria to sit at during the lunch break, and close by were their locker rooms. Everyone seemingly sat down randomly. Nevertheless, the table was quiet, everyone waiting in silence for the time where they would go out again to choose their opponents. With one notable exception. Anyone ever wonder why gummy worms are bigger than gummy bears? Next to him, his fellow American Tsunotori glanced at Parker quizzically. No, why would anyone think that? I'm just saying. Parker shrugged, throwing a bear into his mouth. You'd think it'd be the other way around. As interesting a topic as it might be, there are more important things to focus on, Tenya said, throwing his perspective into the pool, hopefully stopping his vice representative from distracting everyone from their train of thoughts. At first glance, it was rude for Peter to talk like that, or it could simply be his way of reducing his stress. Thoughts aside, Parker notched an eyebrow upwards. Like what? How about the fact that we're about to beat the crap out of each other over national TV? Toage offered with a coy smirk. I'm planning on saving what few cubes I have left, Sato commented. Gonna be a good way to improve afterward. He grinned, flexing an arm. Not that I'll need much to beat you guys. A good-natured chuckle rang throughout the table, most of the sound coming from Parker. Didn't Todoroki freeze you? Ribbit, Asui inquired. The large boy flinched, flustered. I got out. I helped, Tsunotori added. There were many brave team efforts all around. What we need to focus on is what's ahead, Takoyami muttered. And Jiru pointed at him with a thumb. What he said, except without making it sound all ominous. The bird-headed boy closed his eyes. It is simply the truth. Sato laughed nervously. It was a joke, relax. Wasn't the best one, dude, Parker said apologetically. Jiru rolled her eyes, coming from the quip master himself. That's low. What? Peter said, flabbergasted. I don't quip. As one, with the exception of Bakugo, nearly half the table raised an eyebrow, causing the American to pout. The only ones who didn't notice much were the girls from Class 1B. Okay, you got me, I do. Peter shrugged. Well, it is better than screaming die all the time if you ask me. Asui added. What was that, Frogface? A slam came from the other end of the table as Bakugo's red eyes glared at Peter and Asui. He stood up, finishing his burger in a few harsh bites, stating facts. Like Takoyami-chan, I'm just saying the truth. Bakugo snarled at Asui's jab. Peter raised his hands. Easy, easy guys, let's not get at each other now. We can do it in the ring. The intervention allowed Bakugo to turn towards Parker, growling as he narrowed his eyes. "Oh, we will, Parker, we will." The blonde hissed at the brown-haired American with the force of 100 nuclear bombs. Asui's eyebrow quirked up curiously. "The best heroes don't hold back. They take every confrontation fucking seriously. When we get into that ring, no more faking. You better bring your A game, or else." Bakugo growled as he opened the door. Like you should, and slammed it upon exiting. A tense silence filled the room. Tenya nodded his head sagely. Clearly, the tension between his fellow students was boiling over. "Taking a fucking chill pill, why don't you?" Parker muttered under his breath in English, almost bitterly as he ate the last of his dessert. "I don't think he ever will, Peter-san," Yaoyorozu added as she scarfed down a rice ball. "Is it me, or was that the first time Bakugo called someone by name?" Asui mentioned, finger to her chin. "He doesn't call his fellow classmates by name," Kendo asked, speaking up for the first time as she sat next to Toage and Pony. "Well, he calls me Frog or Frogface, Ida-chan Four Eyes, and Midoriya-chan Deku for some reason," Asui answered. "Before he called him Redshirt or American. This is the first time he's called someone by their real name." "Wait, really?" Parker asked. Tenya perked up. "I suppose you are right. Perhaps in his own way, Bakugo is coming around," he mused, cupping his chin in thought. True enough, the bomber was very temperamental and confrontational, never giving anyone aside from the teachers their names. "Well, if he's looking to be friends in his own way, ask Midoriya." Peter mused bitterly. "Heard they were childhood friends. I wouldn't want that guy as my friend." He took a sip from his drink, looking up to the TV. "Oh, there goes Mina on the relay race. It's starting." Tenya took a deep breath, but he couldn't stop himself from sighing. Parker looked around sheepishly. "What? Just trying to change the subject." More silence from Parker's end of the table as he sighed. "Ain't working, is it?" "Yeah, it's not," Jiru answered. "I mean, this is big. Bakugo just said someone's name who isn't a teacher. Still, Bakugo is our classmate, however rude he is." Yaoyorozu spoke diligently. "It is in our best interest to help him come around as best as we can." The American picked at his meal a bit before plopping a slice into his mouth, eyes rolling. "Yeah, sure. All right, dear listeners, it's time for the minigames. You thought they were out, but here come your runner-ups from the War of Flags," President Mike declared from the stands. Next to him, Parker and Jiru winced at the volume. "Guy really knows how to keep it subtle," the punk girl commented, rubbing her sore ear. "Think those stereos on his neck have a mute button?" Sato asked, curiously, looking up at the TV screen in the cafeteria as all the other students who didn't make it to the finals came out to the field. "Sato-san, he's our professor," Yaoyorozu chided. "I know, but..." The muscular boy shrugged. Looking around, "You can't say you're not curious." "We shouldn't be discussing this," the black-haired girl deflected quickly. "Think there's a button behind it?" Pony asked. "But there are buttons on the front," Parker pointed out. He noticed a pause. "Of that neck thingy he wears." Yaoyorozu's eyes looked to the side as Tenya can see the wheels in her head turning. "I suppose. But that device of his which helps amplify his voice should have adjustment settings to the side to make it easier for his hands. Could it?" Yaoyorozu mused. "It's possible. All the basses and amps I deal with have their buttons in the back or the side," Jiru stated. "Mostly the back, but in Mike Sensei's case, I can see why it would be on the side." "You know you can just ask him, Rabbit," Asui said, casually. Parker blinked, eyeing everyone at the table. The American drummed his fingers before throwing his hands up. "Not it," Tenya sighed. "Parker, I understand your wish to relax before the event, but this is inexcusable. We are talking about our teacher. Guess Tenya's asking him." Kendo spoke up for the first time as she sat with her fellow Class 1B peers. Toage was grinning per usual, while Tsunotori was more neutral-faced. The Ida made a sound not unlike what came out of his engines after they ran out of steam. "Excuse me," Tenya asked. Then, he saw everyone in the table, all of whom had their hands up. Even a sheepish Yaoyorozu, and a mildly blushing Shinso who has kept quiet this whole time. "Sorry bro, those are the rules," Parker said. Tenya was floored. "Our rules? Was this some kind of game they were playing? Had he missed out on the signs? When did the game start? How foolish could he be?" But I. "Nope," Parker said with a grin that matched Tokage's. "That's how it works, dude. Tell us over the group chat how it goes down." Sato waved his hand. "I'm sure he'll be nice to answer ya, Ribbit," Asui reassured with a pat on the blue-haired boy's shoulder. Tenya sputtered, "Wait, what do you mean? Are you not coming with me?" No one met his gaze. Asui blushed, looking to the side. And at that moment, Tenya felt like he'd failed every Ida that came before him. "All right, then as class secretary I must stand up to the task." He stood up in pride, cup of Toage in hand, and about-faced. I will return once I get confirmation from Mike Sensei about his equipment. The boy left the room, and he broke into a light jog. Better ask Mike Sensei fast and then head back to fill up with more fuel. Before long, all the students in the cafeteria went to the locker room to make final preparations. Ida hasn't returned yet, much to the surprise of many on Class 1A's side. Todoroki and Midoriya came back together as well, but think Ida will be back soon. Midoriya wondered aloud, looking out in concern as he was stretching, eyes watching the TV. Before it, the minigames were still going on. The stadium was more or less organized chaos from Pony's eyes. According to Mike, who was calling it, they were doing an assortment of various games utilizing their intelligence and quirks. She saw the Uraraka girl ace a giant tic-tac-toe game tournament watched over by 13. The red-headed Tetsu clone was in an arm wrestling competition against Shishida, with others watching on. Lastly, many other students were finding and collecting various items, even going into the stands for a scavenger hunt of sorts. Peter, Midoriya, Zero and others were watching and rooting as if they were spectators, calling out some classmates like Uraraka, Kirishima, and some of her own peers in Class 1B like Awase and Manga. The blonde Texan sat on her bench, firing 2 horns from her head as she commanded them to float around. She felt her horns grow back, and Pony remembered her lessons under Mr. Vlad as they underwent their training and refinement exercises. She was able to get 2 under control okay. Any more and they would falter and fall to the ground. She could fire them in rapid succession, although only 1 or 2 at a time. If she really focused, she could pull off do 3. She was improving, but controlling them as finely as she could with 2 would take time. 4 was asking for the impossible. Pony let out an audible sigh. Still got lots to learn. She muttered in English, "I think Ida may be lost." Peter answered Midoriya as he dug through his locker, taking white vials of something and slotting them into his web shooters. He must have had extra in reserve. Considering how much he had used in the race and during the war, he would have ran out of web fluid during the tournament. If he doesn't hurry back soon. Yaoyorozu looked up at the clock and Pony did so too. 8 minutes until their lunch break was over and they would be called out to begin fighting. "I am back." The door swung open violently, and Bakugo had to move quickly to avoid Ida's entrance. "Watch it, 4 Eyes, you almost got me," Bakugo barked, holding a thermos in hand as he went back to drinking its contents. The blue-haired kid looked apologetic. "Apologies, but I found Mike Sensei when he was going to the restroom during a commercial break." Ida smiled. "Oh, what'd you find out? So where's the button for his voice?" Jiru inquired with crossed arms. Pony was attentive too. After all, she had Mike Sensei as well and that neck device on his person looked intriguing. Maybe she could find a device to help her with control of her horns. Something to hand down to the support department when she got a chance. "I have confirmation." Ida beamed, puffing out his chest, adjusting his glasses, and placing his hands on his hips. "Mr. Mike has his amp device controls on the right side via holographic configuration to his fingerprints. It was a commissioned piece for my island as he told me. I hope this information has sated the curiosity of my opponents and fellow heroes and we get it. Now shut up and get ready." Bakugo snarled. "This ain't a damn walk in the park," he said, shoving his thermos and ice packs that were around his arms in the locker. He stood back up before he marched to the door, walking past Ida before he stopped and turned. Pony followed his gaze, first to Peter, then to Midoriya as his lips twitched in annoyance, and finally Todoroki before he closed the door and left. "Such a bad sport. I hope everyone is satisfied." Ida turned back towards the others. "Nah, you're good. Thought you'd get lost." Parker waved before the blue-haired boy adjusted his glasses and smirked proudly. "Thankfully the walls had maps for me to find my way. When it comes to a sense of direction I am unparalleled," Ida declared as Peter laughed. "Sure thing, buddy. You're better than me in that regard. I can only get by with memory and landmarks." Pony focused her eyes on Peter and her big blue orbs softened. To think that nearly 2 weeks ago he was fighting for his life against villains, and he was now acting as if nothing had happened. She saw Todoroki stand up and walk towards the door. "See you in the tunnel," he stated towards Yaoyorozu. Then he looked back at them group, prominently in Midoriya and Parker's direction before he departed too. Pony looked at the clock. 7 more minutes. She saw the minigames wind down to a close and the blonde took a deep breath. "Have courage, Pony. You're just gonna talk to him and thank him," Pony thought to herself as she stood up and walked across the locker room. Hooves clacking along the floor as Peter strapped his web slingers onto his wrists. She saw Yaoyorozu reading a book several lockers down and she narrowed her eyes. "Don't bother. Just talk to him." "Hey Peter," Pony said in English, hands behind her back as she smiled down at him. Peter looked up and grinned. Sup, Pony? Nervous for the tournament? The brown-haired boy asked back in his native tongue, and Pony felt pink rush to her cheeks. She could feel various eyes on him and her, but she didn't care. Sort of. Performing in front of so many people can be a bit nerve-wracking, she replied before taking a seat beside him. A nice distance away, of course. Can't be too bold with a shy boy like Peter after all. He was like a delicate horse, not a wild stallion. But I'm doing my best to get used to it. After all, as heroes will be in the spotlight the whole time. Yeah, you're taking it better than me. Peter laughed, grinning as he looked at the floor. I'm a nervous wreck when talking to so many people on a stage. Like, I needed that speech of mine or else I'd just be falling over myself. You sounded confident to me, and when people were looking at you during the war. Pony had her hands on her lap, and she scooted just half an inch closer. Peter didn't notice. Perfect. Well, I just smiled and waved is all. I'm trying to do my best out there, thinking of what certain people would do in my shoes. The boy's eyes were looking off in the distance, as if he wasn't here, and try to emulate them, I suppose. Well, I say you're doing a great job, Peter. I mean, you heard what the audience and Mr. Mike said. Even the social media feeds agree. Look, Pony pointed at the screen and Peter followed, seeing the students clear the field upon completion of the minigames. Peter bit his lip, seeing the social media comments feed in. This Parker kid is intense. Noble 6 or 11. You, this boy be closer to All Might than anyone in UA right now, and it ain't even close. Hashtag you a sports fest everman. Is this guy a pro in disguise or something? Oh, fat cat MCG 33. Gaijin boys are totes a dotes a lawler real Utsushimi. UA truly is the best school. We must work harder to surpass them. Do your best, fellow heroes. Yurashi and Asa. This sports fest is a wash. WWW Parker might rolling this thing. Katagara. Apparently, Peter muttered. Strange really. Back home, if the public found out if I was this kind of superhero, I don't know what I would do. Back home, he had his hands interlocked, elbows on his knees as he looked deep in thought, taking a deep sigh. What makes you think that? Pony asked curiously, tilting her head. Peter perked up, eyes wide. Well, he stammered, scratching his arm. Just didn't want to attract too much attention because I didn't know what to do with it, hee. He laughed awkwardly, still trying to get used to it and stuff, even if it is commonplace for most heroes nowadays. Well, you got me to help, Pony chirped, making the boy of her dreams look up at her, his chocolate orbs meeting her sapphire ones. You made me better, so I wanna do the same for you too. Her voice softened as she fiddled with her sun-kissed locks. Only fair I repay you back. We girls down in Texas never leave a debt unpaid after all. You don't have to worry about a thing, Pony. Peter grinned, the depression from before evaporating. But I appreciate the thought. This entire sports festival has been so much fun. He sat back, looking around as everyone was getting ready and filing out of the room towards the tunnel, where we can just use our abilities and cut loose and have a good time. You were having a good time. Pony giggled. Most of us were clawing and scraping like hogs in a pen trying to catch up. Do pigs have claws and can scrap? Peter inquired with a quirked eyebrow. Well, they have cleft feet. Could be claws, could be hooves, Pony corrected, and the two of them laughed, earning them the gazes of several others. Peter, she spoke, she paused, biting her lip as she tried to bring the words out. Just say it. But a lump formed in her throat, her cheeks burning up, as Pony took a deep inhale. I really want to say that. Would all contestants please report to the tunnel for the seating? Said a voice over the intercom, and Pony looked up as she saw Peter stand up. Okay, time to be the deputy rep, Peter muttered in Japanese. He looked down at Pony. We gotta go, Pony. We can talk later, sound good? Yes, of course. And no worries. Not like, haha, the sky is falling or nothing. Pony laughed loudly, even though she was cussing like a rancher inside of herself. Damn it, girl. Get a grip. Be more confident. Let's go. And Peter, let's do our best, she added with a soft and sad smile. You got it, Peter whispered back with a nod. Alright guys, let's move it. Everyone please follow me, Kendo-san and Parker-san. Yaoyorozu called out as she and Kendo got to the door, opening it for them. May the best man win, Midori. Peter patted Midoriya's shoulder with a grin as he joined his fellow class reps. Midoriya nodded, smiling back. Pony allowed some of the others to walk past her, and she followed suit. She saw Yaoyorozu and Peter talking again as they walked in soft and hushed tones. They talked at each other so easily. Pony gripped her fists and her eyes bored lightly into the creation girl. Allies yesterday, enemies today. Pony thought, and deep down, she prayed for the chance to fight the black-haired beauty herself. Up ahead, Todoroki, Bakugo, Tokoyami and Shizaki waited patiently. Bakugo scoffed and joined the group, while Todoroki was neutral, but he and Midoriya locked eyes before they set their gazes on the students leading the group. Her eyes were with them, the people she would need to surpass. Momo Yaoyorozu, if we fight, I will beat you, Pony declared mentally, and the group exited the tunnel and walked onto the field of the approving and roaring audience. And here they are. Give them a hand, ladies and gents, your sweet 16. Mike's little speech whipped the crowd into yet another frenzy. They really couldn't get enough of those students, which was nice. It would serve them well when the recommendations came in. Could go without the bleeding eardrums. Shouta was already on Recovery Girl's checkup list. Pretty sure adding hearing loss would end with him staying in these bandages for the rest of time. Threats of acting like some cheap movie villain aside, Shouta did his best to keep track of the students as they came out. Most of them sold the image of confidence rather well. Bakugo kept his eyes on the center stage, taking point in the little group followed closely by Todoroki. The dual-colored boy was so stiff that you could use his back as a ruler. If Shouta had to hazard a guess, he was trying to put on the image of silent strength along with Bakugo. No smiles, no waving, two permanent scowls that somehow accumulated into an act capable of challenging endeavor. The second they went out, it was like flipping a switch. Class 1B's representative, Kendo Itsuka, took her time near the front, waving at the crowd and smiling calmly. Next to her, the other American in Vlad's class exaggerated her waves, but she didn't smile. She kept looking at her soon-to-be competition. And the crowd went into a crescendo as the rest of the winning team came out. Parker, Ida, Midoriya and Yaoyorozu walked out like conquering kings and queens if the noise level was anything to go by. Parker was tentative, barely managing to wave at the roaring crowd and keep up his smile. The other three and everyone else kept their cool, laser-focused on the end goal like they should be doing. Even the general education kid Shinso was doing a good job keeping focus. Thankfully, they remembered to take this seriously. One by one they lined up before the main stage. Alright then, to decide the seeding of the finals, we will draw lots numbered 1 through 16 at random. To those unfamiliar with seeding, it goes from 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15 and so on. Now then, one at a time please. She gestured to the box in front of her, and the students got into a line and walked up, reaching in and pulling out a ball the size of a golf ball. Rather pointless, but there was something to be said about the luck of the draw. In hero work, you could only prepare so much before a threat busted down a wall and forced you to fight it. With every ball that was taken, the number displayed itself on the Jumbotron. We have our selections. Now, here is the seeding. More importantly, the order in which they were fighting. One by one, the names come on, with several brackets appearing, 4 in each column. Kendo Itsuka vs Pony Tsunotori. Bakugo Katsuki vs Tokoyami Fumikage. Midoriya Izuku vs Ida Tenya. Todoroki Shoto vs Toage Setsuna. Peter Parker vs Hatsume. Shinso Hitoshi vs Rikido Sato. Yaoyorozu Momo vs Shizaki Ibara. Jiru Kyoka vs Asui Tsuyu. There they are, dear listeners and viewers alike, we have our first round matches. In a few short minutes, our very own students will show us their stuff and pull no punches. It's gonna be big, it's gonna be loud, it's gonna be plus ultra, so don't change that channel as we've got the next generation of heroes right here for you to see. Pretty sure they'll hear you too, Shouta grumbled. Thankfully, the radio hero didn't comment on his muttering, instead thanking the dozens of sponsors that apparently gave the money required to host this broadcast. All but 2 went back, and the 2 girls from Vlad's class assumed positions on opposite sides of the arena. Midnight took her spot and Cementos gave the rundown to the 2 opponents. The entire field quieted down, eagerness forcing each of them to watch and wait for the proverbial gun to go off. So AIZAWA. I don't know who's going to win, Shouta drawled, so stop asking and just watch. But if he thought about it, 3 matches. That's how long Endeavor had to wait until Shoto decided if he wanted to keep up his little rebellion. First round was a wash, as he could beat that lizard-looking girl easily with his ice, but that made it the perfect opportunity to use his fire. Make the first opponent a sacrifice, and the weak would know how much better off they'd be to forfeit than try and face him. Anyone with a brain would do that, except his son, that is. He'd use his ice until he ran into a brick wall. Thankfully, that brick wall seemed to be on his side of the bracket. A few notable students among the crop of first years. They wouldn't see Shoto's first match as a sacrifice, they'd see it as an opportunity. An opponent so great that they couldn't ignore him, and that would force them to use everything to overcome him. Looking at most of them, there were a fair number that would try to overcome Shoto on pride alone. Commendable admiration, but it only served to give Shoto enough opponents to push him further, closer to the mountain of number 1. If he didn't, the boy had no excuse. After all, he'd already called upon his flame twice now out of desperation. Deep down he knew he couldn't beat the best with just that woman's quirk alone. Fire and ice must be used to ascend to the pinnacle. In some ways, he was even thankful to that American brat and that green-haired kid for forcing Shoto into a corner. A good start, but it wasn't nearly enough. He should be filling the arena with heat like Endeavor's own Hellflame. Nothing less would be acceptable for his son. Until his matches, there were only one worth paying attention to. That annoying upstart American, Peter Parker. The cocky brat made him grit his teeth. At first, he thought Parker's supposed showings in the classroom were flukes. Then the obstacle course happened, and the war. Those were no fluke. He was talented. He was skilled. He was everything Shoto needed to surpass. Yet time and again he was a brick wall standing in his way. Just like if Shoto lost to Parker yet again in front of a national audience. Denji's blood went cold as he felt a dark nostalgic chill flow through his spine. No, it couldn't happen again. Fate denied him once, it would not happen again. After all, Denji didn't put all of his ambition into having another of American descent crush his dream to be the best there ever was. Once was a slight, twice. There were no words to describe the kind of insult that would be. For now, he turned his gaze to the head of ash blonde hair in the stands, the only other challenge that might prove worthy. Bakugo Katsuki. According to the reports, the boy was registered as someone with an explosion quirk and was talented, and he showed it. Although now, it seemed his time at UA had given him the tools needed to harness his ability to go even beyond, even when hampered by baby powder which neutralized his quirk. Another surprise in the grand scheme of things, but nothing that couldn't be dealt with. Perhaps, the boy would be an adequate warm-up for the rest of the finals, considering he and that green-haired brat were in Shoto's bracket. Looking over the brackets, Denji couldn't help but smile. Most of the impressive students were in Shoto's bracket, Parker being an exception. They would wear Shoto down if he kept using his mother's quirk, forcing him to call upon his fire just to survive. He might want to spite his father, but the fact of the matter was that he wanted to win just as much as every other student wished to, and that was one thing Denji was happy about. His son had inherited his competitive spirit, that hunger for victory. His drive would overpower his promise, and he would call upon his fire. He would see that he couldn't reach the top with just one quirk, and the taste of where he could go with both quirks would prove intoxicating. Shoto was, after all, his son. Yet a thought nagged at the back of his mind. If Shoto managed to not use his fire, if he lost without using it, or worse, made it to the finals and got upstaged by Parker without using his fire once, his entire plan would be a wash. The world would be praising. Denji's eyes looked up at the social media feed, seeing the common rabble blather on how they were seeing the all might of this generation. That was the common denominator the sheep were spouting. Another one to block his childhood dream that he had carried into adulthood, fatherhood, and beyond. He gritted his teeth, feeling the temperature ramp up around him. Shoto must learn that his actions had consequences. He cooled down, seeing the sponsor's side scroll, one of them being a divorce attorney firm. Denji shook his head. It was a dark, heinous thought, and he gripped his arms. No, even through it all, he wouldn't do that to her. He was a hero after all, not a villain, not even to motivate his son. He reopened his green eyes at Class 1A's suite. Use your ability not for yourself, but for others, or else. His glare was focused on Shoto as he and the Class 1A students were sitting in their press box now. You don't deserve to be a hero, much less deserve my name. If there was one thing that Itsuka knew she was at least decent at, it was reading people. Whether her classmates wanted to call her the big sister and throw her into the representative position, she always found herself capable of reading the situation. And right in front of her, Pony was being an open book. Itsuka couldn't remember any time that she'd seen the cute foreign exchange student this focused on anything. Though, she did have a habit of glancing at the stands, more specifically, towards a certain other American. Itsuka sighed. Honestly, the open secret that was Pony's admiration towards Parker was, while cute, kind of a hassle. Hero work didn't exactly leave much time for the thing that most people call a family life. Also, Parker was as awkward as they came. Nice guy, but you'd have better luck hitting him with a sign that spelt out your intentions. However, Itsuka was wise enough to know how long Pony had trained her horns during the last 2 weeks. She stayed longer after school to practice with her horns. Seeing how far she had come from the shy foreign exchange student to becoming more confident and capable, it had to be because of Parker. The USJ incident hit UA, and Class 1B hard. Even Monoma didn't go on a tangent until a while after classes resumed. Pony, however, was focused, and Itsuka, in the times she used the gym, could see Pony in the training centers, practicing her flying and her horns. Seeing it all bear fruit during the obstacle race and the war, it made Kendo Itsuka proud and happy for her. Still, sweet as she was, Pony displayed ferocity and vigor during the race when she was able to take out Todoroki and Bakugo to win the race by a horn, literally. Still, all of this for a boy, when hero work made family life tough. She hoped he wasn't the only reason Pony was so serious though. There was more to hero life than boys. The rules are simple. The round is done if a fighter is knocked out of the ring, or they are deemed unfit to continue. Cementos explained, if there is any violation, I will stop the match immediately, understand? Crystal clear, Professor, Kendo said, waving a hand. The stone man looked to Pony. She kept her gaze squarely on Kendo, but nodded. Kendo winced. Geez, this girl was intense right now. And remember, this is your chance to show the world what you can do. Do your best, Cementos said with a grin, walking to the edge of the arena and making a high-rise seat for himself to watch over the match. Kendo stretched her arms. Pony put her hands to her head, aiming her sights at Itsuka. Sheesh, not even any pre-fight banter. I'm not gonna let you win because of him, Pony-chan. I have my reasons too. May the best girl win. Itsuka grinned, getting into position. Pony exhaled through her nose, and her feet dug into the floor like a bull ready to charge. No words. Oh yeah, she's been this focused once when Toage trolled her about Parker during their own private races. On the Jumbotron, the words begin flashed across the screen. And begin, Professor Midnight declared, cracking the bullwhip. Pony fired off her horns the second that the heroine was finished and the crowd roared. They rocketed towards Itsuka, but they weren't going to do a thing. Barely a thought, and Kendo's giant hands swatted the projectiles out of the way. She winced, but nothing a few nicks on her hands could do to stop her. The little things cracked the ground where they hit, shattered and useless, but Pony could always grow more. In fact, 2 more fired off. Itsuka burst into motion, sprinting across the distance while her giant hands pushed against the ground with a motion akin to a monkey. The Orangette saw Pony's eyes go wide for a second before she hopped on her 2 detached horns and did the one thing that Itsuka really hoped she wouldn't do. Fly off. It was what Itsuka would have done in her position. However, it really didn't help. She had a brain after all. Another horn flew at the Orangette, and Kendo batted it aside as easily as another came zooming in. She can use 3 for real now, Itsuka muttered, green eyes going up to the air. Pony scowled, no doubt focused on doing damage, but Itsuka saw the horns on her feet wobble lightly, so she could, but not for long. The strain would be too much and she'd fall unless she was really good at balancing on one horn, and her wide hooves wouldn't allow that. And Tsunotori has taken to the skies. Aerial superiority is hers. Thanks, Sensei. Play-by-play is really working out for us. Stopping her musings, she half smirked at her floating classmate. With an enlarged hand and a grunt, Kendo smashed the ground in front of her, breaking the cement tile into a dozen different chunks, or as Itsuka would like to call it, ammo. Pony immediately went on the offensive, firing off several horns one at a time like a rotating crossbow as she began to circle Itsuka. They were nowhere near as fast, thanks to her focusing on the 2 supporting her. At her current speed, Kendo could keep track of them as well as pick up a handful of rocks. One hand to defend, the other to use the tile fragments to strike at her opponent. One horn went straight for her, and Kendo put up her hand to defend. But Kendo didn't feel it connect with her giant hand. Out of the corner of her eye, Itsuka saw it flanking around her shoulder. She bent down, twisting as far as she could to dodge and throw her payload. It was a lazy throw, but the chucks were sizable enough that they forced Pony to dip out of the way. A second of breathing room, and enough time to understand that this was either going to end with Pony falling off her horns from the effort of her firing multiple salvos while airborne, or getting a lucky shot. Itsuka couldn't just keep throwing rocks, but thankfully she didn't need to. Sweet as she was, and she had gotten better since the year began, all people had limits in regards to their quirks. Using it constantly hurt Pony's head, and she'd already put in enough work in the obstacle course and the war. She'd eventually run out of gas, even with the 1-hour break to let her recover. Time was on Itsuka's side if she kept her guard up. Another horn came her way, and one swipe was all it took to eliminate it. She saw Tsunotori descend to the ground as she put her hooves on one horn and aimed with her head, the other horn that was keeping her aloft flying towards her. Too easy, Itsuka declared, batting aside the one horn, only for Pony to be right in front of her in mid-charge. What? Itsuka threw her hand out like a shield, and felt Pony smash into her hand, head and shoulder first. Gah! One of her horns was in her hand now. She reached around to grab Pony, but the girl kicked off and Itsuka seethed at being kicked by her hooves. In her stumbling backward, she felt two objects slam against her stomach and shoulder, and the horns started to push. The twin impacts of the horns was enough to make Itsuka cough. They flew beyond the many broken and useless horns around the arena, taking her with them as their unwilling passenger. Itsuka struggled, but the horns seemed to move whenever she did, her shoes skidding amongst the ground, which only flipped her around so that two more horns could pierce either side of her jacket. Pony was focused on her opponent, moving her horns whenever Itsuka tried to grab them across her body, even with blood dripping down her temple. Pony's forehead was bleeding as she arched her back and yelled. The horns pushed Itsuka off her feet, making the girl yelp as she was forced off the ground. She grunted and coughed as she winced in pain, rolling off the ground as she's been pushed. She rose to her feet, ready to continue, but she heard the bell. She looked down and saw that her foot was on the grass, out of bounds. Her head fell, and Itsuka felt like a deflating balloon. Holy moly! Tsunotori took to the sky and literally flew her opponent out of the ring. Our first round winner is Pony Tsunotori. Kendo rubbed her forehead, seeing her hand marked with countless pricks and scrapes as the crowd gave their applause. Man, she got me good. Itsuka couldn't help but laugh. She'd lost, but the American from Texas had gotten the better of her fair and square. Blinking the remaining stars out of her eyes, she saw Pony walking towards her. Her focus was gone, and those blue eyes were back to being sweet. "You okay, Kendo-san? I hope I didn't rough up your hands too bad," she said, and Itsuka grinned. "I'm alright, Pony-chan. Not happy I lost, but..." She shrugged. "Sun will come out tomorrow. Great tactics, by the way." Itsuka pointed at Pony's forehead. "You gonna be okay yourself? You're bleeding." The blonde shook her head. "I'll live." Her eyes went to the class 1 suite, and Peter was whooping and hollering. Pony beamed as bright as the sun, and she skipped past Itsuka, excited as could be. Itsuka sighed. Well, good luck to her. She needed something to boost that confidence of hers. As for Kendo, she needed an ice pack and something to drink. She may have lost, but she lost to a friend, and she was on her way to being a better hero. If she could do that in her own way, then it was her duty as a big sister to help. "That was awesome," Peter exclaimed, beaming as he sat back down in his seat. "You were at the edge of your seat the whole time. Me and Koda here had to move aside," Sato said with a wry grin, Koda giving a shy wave in the process. Peter blinked before he blushed. "Sorry, was I causing a fuss? You were rooting for your friend. Ain't nothing wrong with that, other than maybe you should tone it down a bit." Kyoka smirked. Peter laughed bashfully as he rubbed the back of his head. "You sure were cheering loud in English. I think you were the only English yelling person in the stadium," Mina stated from behind him, sitting above with her fellow classmates. "Yeah, could you reel it back? Thought you were gonna lose your voice there." Zero winced, rubbing his ears as he sat next to Mina. "Way to lay it on, but holding back may help." "Okay, indoor voice going forward. Sorry, Pony's a good friend. You'd do the same for your buddy too, right?" Peter looked back at Zero, hands on his hips with an expectant look. "Well, yeah, of course, but at the end of the day, you may end up fighting her if you go all the way to the final match." Zero pointed up to the Jumbotron, seeing Pony's icon advance to the next round, in which she would face the winner of. "About time we head on down," Takoyami stated, rising from his seat and looking at Bakugo, who also rose up. Their red eyes met each other. "I'm not going to hold back." He allowed Bakugo to pass, the ash blonde walking with his hands in his pockets. "Neither am I," Bakugo growled as he went into the tunnel. Takoyami watched him go. "Hey Takoyami, do your best, buddy." Peter waved, grinning as he earned the attention of the bird-headed boy. "Yeah, you got this. Saw how you hit him on the ropes back in the war from the highlights. Man, you don't mess around." Jiru flexed, showing a toothy smile of his own. "Be careful, okay? Bakugo may have a temper, but he has a motor like a fighter jet," Asui added. Takoyami smiled softly. "Your support is appreciated. I fought him before in the darkness, but if I am to be a hero, I must brave the light and overcome it." The shadow user then went into the tunnel, and Peter could hear the mutterings of Izuku sitting by his side. Kaken and Takoyami are both very fierce fighters, but Takoyami's dark shadow is faster, but weaker in day. Can it get weakened with additional light sources? What if Takoyami knows this and uses dark shadow's speed? But Kaken is no slouch in that department either. What if it's like Ida-kun and Parker-san's match where it's over in the blink of an eye, or he's in a mumble storm right now it seems. Peter waved his hand. Midoriya too focused on going over the upcoming match in his head. Behind him, he felt Uraraka kneel down. Hey Deku-kun, you're doing the thing again." She grinned, going up to the distracted green-haired boy and holding out her hand. Snap. Peter inhaled sharply, looking away as he felt his heart race a little. He could hear Midoriya talking with a laughing Uraraka as Peter focused on breathing. Peter-san. Peter turned towards the voice, seeing a concerned Momo. Are you alright? The American exhaled and rubbed his eyes. Yeah, I'm fine. He spoke in English. He reverted back to Japanese. I'll be okay. Just got goosebumps is all. He forced out a laugh, smiling widely for the black-haired beauty. She was in a new UA shirt now, having replaced her tattered one from the war. You doing good? I'm doing fine. I needed that lunch lest I faint. She patted her midsection. I'm recovering on lipids now, so I should be alright going forward in the tournament. You looked fine until just now. Her black eyes softened. You looked like you've seen a ghost. Was it the noise? Peter bit his lower lip lightly. A snap. Yeah, just the noise. Might be the acoustics of this arena. Spiders have heightened hearing so. Yeah. He leaned back in his seat, smiling as he saw Midoriya stammering at Uraraka's teasing. The match is starting everyone, look, Tenya declared, and Peter turned to the field, seeing Takoyami and Bakugo walk onto the arena, Bakugo taking the far side as the crowd roared. He turned towards Momo. So, who do you think is gonna win? He asked. Momo looked out to the field as the two fighters got into position. As much as it pains me to say it, but I fee. Ida Tenya. A deep voice cut in, and the students turned, seeing their trenchcoat-wearing teacher over by the tunnel leering down at them. The blue-haired boy perked up. Yes, Ectoplasm Sensei. The boy stood up at attention in front of the much taller hero. Please, come with me. Tenya opened his mouth, then closed it as he got up and walked out of the seating area. Well, if you insist, I'll go down to the tunnel and wait for you Midoriya, as our match is after Bakugo's. Tenya followed the teacher, whose face remained static and unchanging, but Peter could see that the pro looked almost summer. Sure thing, Ida-kun. See you there. He waved before Tenya went into the tunnel, and Peter focused on the field. Let the second match for the first round. Midnight raised her bullwhip. Begin. Katsuki gritted his teeth, swiping at Dark Shadow and firing off a blast. Die, you annoying loser, he roared, the shadowy construct taking the blast and whining like a little bitch because of it. That's right, his explosions back during the war had stalled his opponent. Now, no more Yaoyorozu, no more backup, just him and Birdbrain under the sun. Man to man. That bloodlust, Birdbrain muttered, and the shadow beast veered towards Katsuki as he landed. The blonde swiped again, firing another blast and stunning the crying beast. He began to advance, Dark Shadow retreating further as Birdbrain stepped back. Your quirk is only good in dark areas like the tower, Katsuki yelled, satisfied with himself for figuring it out. But out in the daytime it might as well be a weak puppy. Rah! He fired another explosion, stunning Dark Shadow again as he backed off. Grab him, Birdbrain commanded, and Katsuki smirked. Vocal commands. Too easy and too noticeable, dunce. If that thing was a part of Birdbrain, he should train it to have it respond to mental commands to not give the enemy an edge. Oh well, his loss, Bakugo Katsuki's gain. He used his quirk to dart over Birdbrain, avoiding the Shadow Beast's lunge. The monster roared as it charged, but Katsuki got his hands together and fired. Stun grenade. Before him was nothing but light, catching Dark Shadow right in front of it as Birdbrain yelped. Bakugo charged forth, tackling the bird-headed boy to the ground as his hand was a flurry with sparks, right in front of a whimpering and weakened Dark Shadow who looked to be no bigger than a puppy. The other grabbed his beak hard. I had a feeling that you had figured me out, Birdbrain muttered ruefully as he was pinned under Bakugo, and the blonde bomber grinned darkly. This was payback for what you did back in the war, Birdbrain. Besides, it was just a bad matchup. He leered. For you that is. The shadow-wielding student closed his eyes. I yield. I cannot fight now, he admitted, and Katsuki let go of his beak before he stood up. Takoyami has surrendered the match. The winner is Bakugo, Midnight declared, and the crowd roared in approval and praise. Now this was more like it. Things were going back to normal as Katsuki dusted his hands off and pocketed them. Too easy. So my next opponent. He looked to the Jumbotron, seeing his icon advance, and his next stepping stone. Katsuki turned towards the Class 1B suite next to the Class 1As, and he narrowed his eyes at the Hafu sitting there with her peers. Horn girl, that was quick. Takoyami did amazing in the war, but talk about bad luck. His quirk just wasn't good against intense light sources, Mike Sensei stated as Katsuki walked back to the tunnel, eyes locked on 1B's box. Yet Horn girl didn't yield, only glaring back. Hull must have a spine under there. Fine. Birdbrain was a warm-up. Horngirl didn't look all that tough in her match against Orange. Still, she could fly while using her horns as projectiles before growing them back. She won't stand a chance. Katsuki's hand sparked as he walked deeper into the tunnel. For now, making a plan on how to beat Horngirl in decisive fashion. After all, he'd paid back Birdbrain for the war. He needed to get even with the Hafu for the minefield during the race, and Bakugo Katsuki always got even. Man, poor Takoyami, Mina muttered sadly. He didn't land a single hit. Damn, and he was so good in the war too, Sato said somberly. Like, he made the Red Tower impenetrable save for Todoroki's ice barrages. It's like how Mike Sensei said, it was just bad luck. Asui mused, her eyes on her raven-headed peer. With all that light coming from Bakugo's explosions in addition to being out in the sun, Dark Shadow wasn't going to last very long regardless. The Shadow's pretty manly, but I can't say that Bakugo wasn't ready for it, Kirishima said with crossed arms. Yeah, Kaken and Takoyami are strong, but not taking advantage of someone's weakness in battle would be foolish, especially when you're fighting villains. It's as Asui said, just bad luck. Izuku added, seeing Takoyami recover and walk back into the tunnel, although now far more dejected. He stood up. Alright, I got my match next. Good luck Midori, Parker said looking up at Izuku. Ida's Recipro Burst is a straightforward move. If you can dodge side to side with your quirk, you should be able to take advantage of it. His tone was level as he bit his lip. Thank you Parker-san, I'll keep that in mind. Izuku began to walk out of the aisle. Do your best, Deku-kun. I'll cheer both you and Ida-kun on. Hiroraka cheered with a wave and a bright smile. You go give em hell, Midoriya, Kirishima added with a flexed arm. Parker gave a thumbs up. Todoroki meanwhile was silent, but his eyes were on Izuku, eyes full of expectation. That's right, I win this fight and if Todoroki wins his, I'll be fighting him. Izuku clenched his fists and nodded, entering the concourse and taking the private elevator route down 10 yards away. He got inside, going over his strategies in his head. Ida's engine allowed him to move at extreme speeds, so he would be potent offensively and may try to push Izuku out of the ring. To prevent that, going on the attack was his best option. Using 5% one for all, he could match Ida's speed. Well, in dodging and quick movements. In terms of straight-up speed he doubted he could keep up. Or would Ida try to end the fight as soon as it started like he tried with Parker? My best angle is to grapple him, maybe try to go for submission moves to slow him down. Or maybe use Ida's speed against him and try and go out of bounds by force. Izuku looked at his hands. He knew he could only use 0 to 5% right now, and then max power. No, it was too early to consider using 100%. The elevator door opened and Izuku walked out, hand cupping his chin. He walked through the corridor and turned left, ready to advance to the tunnel, when he saw Mr. Snipe standing there. Ah, Midoriya. He put away his phone. Had he been talking to someone? Did you just come down here? He asked. Izuku looked around. No sign of Ida anywhere. Yes, I did. Where is Ida? Our match is about to start. Izuku clenched his hands. Where was he? Ida had to be pulled away due to a family matter. We were about to inform you, but you had already left your suite. Snipe shook his head. Izuku felt his blood run cold. A family matter. Did something happen? He asked, biting his lip. Yes, but now is not the time, Midoriya. Head back to your suite with your classmates. Everything is under control. Izuku's heart fell. He had been planning on fighting Ida, one of his best friends, in an honorable fight, to show the world that they were here. And now, our apologies, but there has been an unforeseen complication with one of our contestants. Midnight's voice echoed through the tunnel. Due to this development, Ida Tenya has forfeited the match. Henceforth, Midoriya Izuku advances by default. Izuku could hear the crowd groan and boo out there as he turned around. He felt a hand on his shoulder, Snipe squeezing it firmly but softly. Don't worry about it. You just focus on your next match. I'm sure Ida wouldn't want you to feel bad for his sake. They got to the elevator and the cowboy hero pressed the button back up to the suite level. Izuku took a deep breath, looking down at the ground. So much for showing his talents even further. Yeah, sure. The door closed. Shouda was already leaving the announcer's box as Present Mike did his best to salvage the situation with his upbeat self, calling out the next fight between Toage and Todoroki. With his good hand he pulled out his phone and called Nezu. The mouse answered after just one ring. Aizawa, what happened to Ida? We were about to inform you, actually. Nezu replied back as he leaned against the wall. I'm afraid there's been a family emergency. Shouda narrowed his eyes. Ida Tenya was always very punctual, followed the rules and was honorable. Sometimes to a fault, but he was an Ida through and through and had great control over his quirk. Not being able to showcase it to more hero firms and have the opportunity to grow pained the dark-haired man inside. And he was feeling for his student. What kind of emergency? Shouda asked with narrowed eyes. His brother, Ida Tensei, the pro-hero Ingenium, is in the in Hasu. Nezu elaborated, and Shouda's eyes widened. Tensei was in Class B when Shouda and Hisashi were starting at UA. All those years ago, he had been a model student, Class B's class representative for all 3 years of his academic tenure, and from what he had learned, an upstanding hero to his community. He's fighting for his life. I see. Shouta swallowed, forcing a swallow down past the lump in his throat. God, one of his own peers. Even if this was a competition to showcase one's talents to hero firms, this was just a series of games in the end. Tenya would rebound and have a chance to showcase his talents again. If not that, then some hero firm would recruit him on the Ida name alone. He was exceptional during the obstacle race after all. Is he with his parents? They are leaving UA. Now for the next bullet train to Hasu. Nezu replied. Will you talk to him? Of course I will, I'm his teacher. Shouta replied in a heartbeat. What happened to Ingenium? He took a deep breath, going to his phone and checking the Pro Heroes website for any news. His eyes widened when he saw one of the threads. Hero killer strikes again in Hasu. Son of a bitch, Shouta muttered under his breath, cursing. You've seen the thread? Yes. According to Tensei-kun's agency, he was hunting for the hero killer to bring him to justice. Nezu sadly mused. Hunter made hunted. Shouta exhaled out his nose. I'll call him now. We're keeping this information suppressed. We don't need the Ida family to get harassed on social media, and most of the faculty save for Toshinori and Hisashi know of this. Nezu said further. I trust you understand this and will keep it a secret. Yeah, understood. Shouta hung up the phone and went to his contacts, getting his student's phone number and calling. Pick up. No response. The black-haired man sighed and pocketed his phone. He would have to call Tenya later. He opened the door, seeing present Mike turn back to see him. Welcome back. I was about to start up the pre-fight hype train. Momizawa, hop on in. Shouta rolled his eyes, limping back to his seat and sitting down. Still, odd for Ida to resign like that. Weird, isn't it? Yeah, Shouta replied back. Sure is. He looked out to the 2 students on the field, Toage Setsuna standing on one end of the arena, and Todoroki Shoto on the other. And now, with this next fight, it is a duel of the recommendeds from rival classes. From Class 1A, you have the fire and ice using Wonderkind, the son of Endeavor and an ace in his own right, Todoroki Shoto. The black-haired man used his good hand to rub his ears. He wants to gag Hisashi so badly. Nah, no need to. And in the other corner, from Class 1B with a very peculiar quirk. She came from parts unknown and put on an impressive and steady showing in both the race and the War of the Flags. She is literally the concept of E pluribus unum. Give it up for Takagi Setsuna. This was gonna end quickly. Shoto ignored the noise, the constant, raging wall of sound that threatened to make his ears burst open. What was everyone expecting? A long, drawn-out match between equals full of ups and downs. He stepped up to the ring, and he was vaguely aware of Midnight talking about the rules. His opponent was tensing on the other end of the stage, but he didn't look at her. Shoto's eyes scanned the crowd till he found 3 people, a vibrant blaze of hair, and a patchwork of green sitting next to a seemingly unimpressive block of quips and noise. Thinking about Midoriya, Shoto found himself glad that he wouldn't have to be worn down when they fought. He would be in top form. For now, a demonstration was in order, and let the 3rd match of the tournament. Midnight screamed. His opponent readied her quirk, arms and limbs separating. It wouldn't do a thing. Begin. The bullwhip came down, his opponent's eyes and mouth detached from their body, and Shoto made the arena freeze. The entire arena was filled with ice. Not a skyscraper-sized glacier, but the entire floor was smothered in ice, and in Tokage's general direction, snow and ice overcame her, like a tidal wave of frost all coming from Shoto. For a moment, no one moved or even breathed. 1,000 people around him, and he could hear a pin drop. He took a long breath, letting the steam rush off him as his body equalized. On the other end of the arena, his opponent stood in frozen shock, her body completely frozen with her detached parts being at the edge of the ice. Toage, a half-frozen Midnight said, "Can you move?" Whoops, got his teacher by mistake. And no, the green-haired girl bit out through chattering teeth. The whip cracked again. Toage is unable to see continue. Todoroki Shoto advances. The R-rated hero declared as she raised her non-frozen arm. Shoto placed his left hand against the wall of ice. He let out stream of heat, enough to start thawing the ice, but not enough to ignite. Inch by inch the ice melted away, freeing his opponent, and the ice was enough to spread to his teacher, enough for her to break out with her own strength. A brief glance told him that she would be fine. Might catch a cold, but nothing a hot drink and a few blankets wouldn't fix. Shoto turned his gaze back to the stands with his peers. None of them could hide their shock. Why were they surprised when he had conjured a glacier during the war? Then again, that exertion of his quirk needed time to channel. His latest attack was instantaneous. Well, this would dissuade them. He saw Midoriya and Parker, the two peers that seemingly never stopped talking, were speechless. Good, they knew what they were up against. Then, in the corner of his eye, he saw that fire. His left side ached, threatening to overtake him and light a spark. But he kept it down. Instead, he focused everything he had on that man. For all of his stupid dreams and delusions, he was still the number 2 hero. There was intelligence, cunning, and common sense burning beneath all that bravado and ego. All three of those had to be screaming how impressive Shoto's right side was. Endeavor's eyes simmered in anger at that fact. Shoto hoped that the man could see Shoto's eyes. He hoped he could see both sides of what he had created, and realized that his half wasn't needed. Turning to the stands, he saw his icon rise up. His next opponent, Midoriya Izuku, sooner than he expected, but he wasn't complaining. He went back to the tunnel, hands in pockets. One step closer, he said to himself, proceeding into the darkness. For the first time in a while, as he walked to the locker room to get his gear, Peter found himself reevaluating a single truth. Whatever force of nature allowed quirks to operate, it didn't care for the laws of conservation at all. The amount of energy required to create that much ice had to be staggering. Astronomical even. Thoughts of the frightening implications of that kind of power. Peter pondered a single question. How would anyone beat that? There was a bit of build-up before the mountain back at the war exploded. Maybe getting in close would work. This was more like dunes of ice, so it was faster. Or it could get you frozen, and last he checked, spiders didn't do well in the cold. Thinking about himself, his own strength, while impressive compared to most other quirks, wouldn't do a thing in the cold. The amount of ice made leverage an impossibility if he was frozen in a bad position, and considering the speed of the ice, it was the most likely outcome. On an open field, the advantages he had during the war and the villain's exercise were out, so what was left? Peter tapped his hand against the locker room table as he walked inside, his eyes wandering around the empty space. It was a small room, locked from the inside so that the contestants could be alone before their matches. Peter was pretty sure that he was supposed to be psyching himself up for his next match against May. Throw on that web shooter and get ready for a fight. That's how athletes got ready for a big match, right? Whatever, he needed to think. Hatsume had all her babies, and most of it was pretty cool tech. Nothing like Mr. Stark's, but cooler than anything that Peter had built before. He remembered a few of her babies. That net gun she used, those hover boots, a motion detection rig that reacted to any movement and worked to move the user out of the way of incoming attacks. Kinda like that little tingle that he got whenever something flew at him. Now that he thought about it, he should probably name that. Something like Peter Cognition. The Peter Tingle. Okay, never thinking those again. Peter flinched. The Peter Tingle going on overdrive. He kicked the table over, using the steel surface as a shield before the door to his room literally blew open. Well, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but the lock on the door did fly off to the other end of the room. From the other end came a beaming Hatsume. Parker, I need your help, Hatsume declared, marching forward towards him. And I need context, Peter said, hesitantly looking over his table shield as he stood up. Hatsume's eyes practically sparkled at the invitation, and Peter leaned back on reflex as she got closer. Fantastic, Hatsume said, casually taking a seat in the only chair not flipped over. Now, how much do you know about support corporations? Peter's mind immediately flashed back to Stark Industries. All of the tech, the suits, the good that it did after Mr. Stark changed. Not too much. I know some companies like Detenrat and Igidalp Inc. exist, Peter admitted, frowning a second later. Wait, back up? Aren't we supposed to be fighting each other in like? He glanced at the clock. 10 minutes. Not important. Hatsume waved off, and Peter felt his shoulders slump in disbelief. What is important that, as one of the Sweet 16, all the support companies are going to be looking right at these matches for hero prospects to advertise for their new gear. Or, if someone from the support course made it this far, she hinted, letting the American figure it out. Peter nodded slowly. He remembered Mr. Aizawa talking about how this was a good chance for each of the students to get a sponsorship from a pro. Guess big companies were what the support people were shooting to impress for employment opportunities. Yeah, he said, but Hatsume was already looking away. Her eyes clouded over in bliss. Just think, all those companies, all those CEOs and R&D directors, all of them looking at my babies. Might need a different name if you're gonna market them, Peter muttered. But Hatsume didn't hear him. She spun on a dime so fast that Peter started to wonder how she didn't get whiplash, walking towards him as Peter retreated backwards on instinct. Which means I'm going to need your help. Peter blinked once, twice. Ooh, okay. How do I help? Simple. May stepped forward again, and Peter could see the outline of her chest get closer as he stopped moving. his back against his locker. You're going to be outfitted with all of my babies so that every inch of you is covered in them for protection, Hatsume declared, leaning forward and clearly forgetting that talk that power loader had with her about personal space. Her bosom was up against Peter's chest. Oh God, why is she so close again? Peter blinked, and it was at that moment that he noticed someone standing in the doorway. Pony, jaw ajar, noting the two of them in the room. Her body pressed against hers. I can explain, Peter said, raising a hand and pointing a finger. He bit his lip as he noted that his heart wanted to escape his chest like that one alien worm thing from the Alien movies. He's just helping me get my babies adopted, Hatsume said. Pony's eyebrows soared upward. I can explain better, Peter corrected shakily. Later, Hatsume said, grabbing his hands, we need to get you some protection. Oh, and lubricate it up too. Gotta make sure it fits. Pony's eyes went as wide as dinner plates. Key protection, she shrieked in English as Hatsume dragged the other American out of the room via the other door, leaving Pony as pale as a ghost. It's not what you think, I swear, Peter yowled back to in English. To the babies, May, CONTEXT. Alright ladies and gentlemen, the next match is about to begin. Hope you enjoyed the breaks, folks. We are at the halfway point of the first round. President Mike roared as the crowd gave its approval, cheering in eager anticipation for the chance to see the star of the first years again. And now, we have our contestants. Peter bit his lip as he stood in the arena, looking silly and blushing like a lunatic as he was in his normal hero outfit. No web shooters given how May tugged him out of the room without a single objection, and he had numerous pieces of equipment on him. So the lubricant was just padding and a vest to separate the gear from the skin. From the hero course, he's been high-flying all over the sports festival since the opening bell. He has the second best time in the obstacle race event since All Might, and his feats during the War of the Flags and the tiebreaker match were nothing short of spectacular and amazing. For someone whose quirk is spider, he sure doesn't look like a spider, does he? Let me hear it for Class 1A's Peter. PARKER. Mike bellowed and the crowd roared, and Peter can hear the chants too. The social media feed on the Jumbotron seemed to go by like lightning. He rubbed his ears, feeling uncomfortable. Although I gotta say, he's wearing a lot of stuff on his person, isn't he? Mike mused, and Peter looked at May, puckering his lips as the pinkette waved towards a confused Midnight. Hey Midnight Sensei. That's not his gear, it's mine, May elaborated, grinning as she had her own gear. I wanted to have a fair fight, so to speak, so I lent him my gear to give him an equal advantage. There was nothing in the rules saying that an opponent can't give someone a piece of gear if it doesn't give them a disadvantage, right? She stated. It's okay by me. Well, that is true. There's nothing in the rules saying that you can't if both parties consent. Seeing how Parker is wearing your equipment and not his own, I can assume he agreed. The raven-haired heroine asked, to which May nodded furiously. The teacher then shrugged. Well, if both contestants are fine with this arrangement, then I will allow it. So willing to even things out, as much as I love for a dominant force, but equal terms is naive and adorable in its own way. Midnight grinned, cracking her whip. Resume on MC. Well, don't mind if I do, okay? Odd, Aizawa added, and Peter wanted to disappear. He could only imagine how he looked in front of the whole world right now. But, if this was to help May, so be it. Now then, for his opponent. She's been called the Mad Witch by her peers and even her professor. She has come locked and loaded and ready for any occasion. Enough to be the first support student to make it to the finals in a while. You will never find her without her support items. From the support department, it's HATSUME May. Mike finished up as Peter tugged at his straps, then tapped his boots. Then something dawned on him. As he got dressed in all of this, he never asked me about how all of this worked. Just run towards me. It'll figure things out all by itself, May yelled, waving as if the pinkette was reading his mind. Peter looked back up and nodded. Normally he would look back at the suite where his class was at, but his dignity couldn't bear what they would think of him. Momo and the others must think that he was a clown now. Has Pony even come back from the locker room? Why was she even down there in the first place? Did she forget something? Peter smacked his cheeks. Okay, gotta focus. Here I come, Hatsume. He got into position, seeing Hatsume lift up a mic, and she began to chuckle. Peter tingle going off mildly now. Begin. Peter ran towards her. All he had to do was get her to ring out. He didn't want to hurt her too badly after. Come on, Parker-san. Show me your legs and speed. Hatsume spoke, and her voice boomed from the stadium speakers. Did she hack into them? Or was she wearing speakers? Peter couldn't tell with all this ambience. You feel it, right? Feel wow. Peter looked down, feeling how lighter he was. The leg braces around his legs were doing something. I do. Exactly. My custom leg braces are flexible and are able to keep up with the user's speed, allowing them to feel lighter, induce less wear and tear, and make you even faster. Peter was ready to push her until, but with my hydraulic attachment bars, I can dodge in any direction thanks to my motion laser sensors. Her bars stuck out, and Peter had to jump over them, yelping as he turned. Those things were super fast, May. Peter yelled in English. If I was any slower I would have been punctured. He chased after again, only for May to dodge to the side again. VOICEOVER. He barked in frustration. Ew, what's going on? His ashy asked as Shouda facepalmed with his good hand, his nose and cheekbones screaming in pain. Yet it was nothing compared to the cringe he was experiencing. He had gotten word from Power Loader that his best first year, Hatsume, was a friend of Parker's and they solicited a lot in his studio right before the match. But this, she's turning the sports festival into a commercial ... and Parker got played. If Parker didn't have the talent, smarts, and heroic instincts to be the best student Aizawa had ever had, he would have expelled him on the spot. But, God, this was just embarrassing. But wait, there's more. May tripped Peter again, the American boy stumbling as he fell forward, until the metal rods on his shoulder got him back upright when his arms lashed out to stop his fall. He stumbled and lost his balance a little. With my auto balancers, also with laser motion sensors, anyone who may fall down can get right back up on their feet. It has hero and civilian applications. Stop messing around, Hatsume, Peter shouted in Japanese before the rods turned. His words and yelling having a Doppler effect, and he began to spin. Oh God, everything was going too fast. Get me off this wildry-eyed. He shouted in Doppler English before the spinning stopped courtesy of the rods, and he stammered, seeing the world go topsy-turvy, stumbling around like a drunk. He focused on May and growled, "Come here you." Oh, how he wished he had his web shooters right now. He charged, but Hatsume jumped high, and Peter looked up. "Wow, I thought only Uraraka could do that," he exclaimed, before noticing how her boots weren't like the big clunky ones Uraraka wore during the war. "Oh, but she can't, my friend." May grinned like a madwoman, which what she is now. "My sleek jump boots use electromagnetic inductors on the soles to allow for fast and easy motion. You can jump to heights never before reached, and land softly with its soft recoil cushions based on the soles too. The perfect Parker attire. That ain't Parker attire and you know it," Peter yelled as he shook his fist, chasing after her where she landed. "It's more sleeker and trimmer for faster motion and to ensure nothing gets in the way. Not like your big Uggs." May turned, eyes still wide and smile still plastered on her face, not even flinching of caring how her baby got compared to another form of footwear. "Oh, a good point. I'll have to jot that down as an improvement. But first," May tapped her wrist and Peter felt his Peter tingle again. Intense. That backpack she gave him started to fire up. "Oh crimey Christ MASSSSSSSS." Peter howled as the jetpack took off, and he began to fly around. Oh wow, this must be how Mr. Stark and Mr. Star-Lord felt when flying. This was the worst. Get him down now. He hates flying. Flying suwooks. I can't control this thigh, whoa. Peter veered left, and he was skimming the surface of the arena wall as the audience gasped at the sight. Even better, my auto balancers combined with my jetpack allow for controlled movement to give you aerial superiority. Even those with non-flying quirks can keep up with those who make the sky their domain. May grinned as she tapped her wrist again, and Peter veered off, flying towards the stadium arena and had his arms and legs ready to soften his fall before the auto balancers deployed again, and he flipped up, landing on his feet as the boy stumbled around. Only for the Peter tingle to act up and Peter avoided a large wide net. Can't catch me like how did Zaru. Only for a smaller net to enclose around him and tighten up as he fell to the ground. Oh come on. He reverted back to English, struggling clumsily as he tried to get out, but all the equipment on his person was clumsy as hell. It was getting tighter too. Are you kidding me? As you can see, my net bazooka from the prior event is slower, but allows for an efficient capture, and can reel in like a fishing pole. But my net pistol is all for the quick apprehension and takedown, with binders inside the netting that increase the more the villain struggles. In other words, the more they squirm, the tighter the netting for easier capture. May declared as her net bazooka from the War of the Flags was at her feet, and her net pistol in her hand as Peter writhed inside. "Ooh, kinky, I love it," Midnight added. Takoyami's voice was cut off, as from out of Peter's eye. He could see that Kota and Sato had their hands over his mouth as he continued to squirm. Oh God, he really was looking foolish. In front of the whole world. She said she only had a few gadgets she wanted to show, that's all. And who made these amazing items, you may ask? May turned, yellow eyes focusing in on the luxurious sweet boxes filled with rich businessmen. Why say no more, support companies, for you're looking at her. Hatsume May. But wait, she grinned, eyes twinkling dangerously as she leered at Peter, licking her lips. Peter tingle, intensifying. There's Muor. There's Moore. The audience plus Peter shouted as one. Todoroki's eyes were twitching. Bakugo was snarling, both of their lips quivering and the latter's teeth grinding at the sight of Parker being played around like a puppet and yowling like a baby. This is the guy I need to surpass. They all fought simultaneously, angry at their rival for being such a clown, and angry at themselves for being weaker than him. Holy crap. Hatsume has Parker-san on the ropes. There's nothing he can do, Izuku said with his pen a flurry in his notebook. Even her movements are faster than even I anticipated. How on earth can she do this? The support department must have some real monsters in there. Is Peter-san going to be alright? Yaoyorozu asked with wide eyes. Peter was now yelling as he was traveling across the arena on best-attached hookshots after he escaped from May's bondage. The pinkette laughing it up and explaining the details of her device. Outlook not so good, Jiru murmured, looking on sheepishly. Gahahahaha. Wow, that is the ace of Class 1A. Guffawed a voice. Everyone in the class turned their heads, seeing Monomonito laughing with a smug and wide grin as he leaned over the wall, standing from the Class 1B suite right next door. Wow, boy does he look foolish or what? He's like a puppet on strings out there. Next All Might. Yeah right. If this is the best Class 1A has, then Class 1B will surelga. His face went blue and he slinked down, hand twitching as he let out a whimpering gasp. Two horns rose up, and the cross-stormy blue eyes of Pony Tsunotori looked back at them. Sorry for the trouble, she growled. Izuku could swear he heard Kendo say whoa over there. Did you have to aim there? Shouted Tetsu before Class 1B's box went silent. So scary. Most of the boys in Class 1A thought as one, before their attention was turned to Peter now skating across the arena with those metal boots of his. Oh dear. Yaoyorozu put a hand to her mouth as Jiru bit her lip. I know he's trusting and all and that's how we won the war but damn. Pei is being a cynic. The punk girl said to herself as she looked over, seeing Izuku continue his riding. Parker-san was able to maintain balance even after moving at such high speeds. When being a hero, having balance while going fast is crucial. What kind of practice can help with that, I wonder? Beam standing on moving trucks. He muttered up a storm as Uraraka smiled while most of the class looked at him awkwardly. I wonder. Same old Deku, mutter machine extraordinaire. She giggled. 10 minutes later, Peter groaned face down on the arena ground, twitching as if he's fought 12 rounds against Mike Tyson. The collection of support gear clinging to his body snapped open and fell off as their batteries lost their limited power so it wouldn't weigh down the user. She'd thought of everything. He peeled his face off the arena floor, glaring with annoyance at May's back as she continued promoting the products and their collective utilities and functions. There was a part of him that felt like he'd been tricked. There was another part of him that reminded him that he knew better than most exactly who he'd been tricked by and that he kinda deserved it for falling for it. The first part was currently in the process of brutally smothering the latter in its sleep and feeling a sense of vindictive satisfaction in the act. Maybe, just maybe, Peter felt a bit petty right now. Maybe just maybe he wanted May to feel what it was like to be unexpectedly yanked to the side across the arena floor by a piece of machinery that was strong enough to pull even him when he tried to dig in his heels a bit to stop the madness. Maybe just maybe he still had a grapple hook with a little bit of juice left clasped on his arm. And maybe just maybe he knew how to operate the damn thing. And so, with a vindictive little smile tugging at his lips from his place on the ground, Peter took aim at May, fully entrusting her auto-sensors and evasion inventions to work like she'd demonstrated about a dozen times over the last 15 minutes. What Peter did not know, he couldn't have known. It wasn't something as mundane as the devices malfunctioning, or something as simple as May having shut them off or them being out of battery. No, the devices were fully functional, fully operational, and giving their readouts as normal. What actually happened was that May, as was typical for someone like her, got an idea in the middle of her speech. Even she couldn't really say what brought on the idea. It hit her like a lightning bolt and blanked out almost every other thought in an instant, whitewashing her brain and making her completely forget about where she was and what she was doing. And so, when the warning lights flashed, May's smile spread from ear to ear, a sparkle emerging behind her eye as she turned and headed in Peter's direction. Beaming smile on display. I've got a OOF. And right then and there, with the machines unable to override her active, conscious motion lest they cause injury themselves, the grapple hook smacked dead center in her chest with a rather hard clang of steel striking steel. Mei's body lurched right back and hit the grass in a spread eagle position, staring up at the sky as Peter gaped in concern, landing outside the ring. Oh shit. Scrambling to his feet, Peter rushed towards his downed friend while hearing the confused and bewildered Midnight call out beside him. There, Hatsume is out of bounds. Peter Parker advances to the next round. Peter jumped off the arena, already berating himself internally with a stream of apologies on his lips. Sorry, I thought you'd dodge it with your gear and I'm so sorry I didn't actually. Mei's hands shot straight up, palms and fingers smacking over his cheeks as she cradled his face and sat straight at a perfect 90 degrees, almost like a cartoon character as she beamed like a loon. She was really close to his face. Their noses were almost touching. Peter could faintly hear the sound of gasping in the crowd. I got an idea, she screamed ecstatically. Thank you, Peter, she cheered lastly in accented English. Peter blinked, thoroughly confused, but before he could ask anything the girl scrambled to her feet, whooping in joy at the top of her lungs and all but skipping out of the fighting arena, cackling like a mad witch. It was, by far, the strangest match the UA Sports Festival had ever seen. There were times that Kurogiri regretted not being able to make many facial expressions. This was not one of them. This was one of those times where he was better off as he was, standing behind the bar, polishing the glasses, letting him curse at the TV to his heart's content. Aside from the low squeak of his cloth against glass and the muted sound of the TV, the only other sound in the bar was a low tap-tap on the bar top. The noise was coming from the lean, almost skeletal figure seated at the bar. Shigaraki Tamura, clad in his usual black shirt and trousers, his arms and shoulders covered with the disembodied hands that were his trademark. TCH, what a loser. Kurogiri glanced at the TV. A young American kid with brown hair was capering around the arena, while a young pink-haired girl was yelling into a microphone. He recognized the young man's name on the TV scroll. Peter Parker. He had been at the USJ not so long ago, being beaten to a pulp by the Namu that the master had provided, the one that subsequently got blown up. The fact that he was up on his feet after being crushed by the anti-All Might beast was surprising. But then again, Recovery Girl was amongst UA. As faculty, they probably got him to the medics immediately after he took the broken Tamura to the master's domicile. So annoying. The goddamn wannabe isn't fighting. Can't even see his goddamn face get kicked in like in that race or war game again. Kurogiri looked again at Tamura. He knew the reason for the younger man's anger. The mere fact that he could see his face was proof enough of what was wrong. The hand that had once covered it was gone, destroyed in that same battle. His face, wrinkled, parched and with a noticeable tear on his lower lip. Tamura had never been the same since he came to From All for One's healing. Perhaps that stupid American isn't all he's cracked up to be. Media and their darlings, building them up just to tear him down. He mused, setting down the crystal clear glass and selecting another. Peter Parker, the next All Might. What a joke. His red eyes went back up to the screen. I'll kill him, after Midoriya and Yaoyorozu that is. Tamura hissed, bloodshot eyes fixed on the TV. Surrounded by wrinkled, yellow skin, his new gleaming white teeth were clenched hard. He's rather pathetic, Kurogiri went on, wondering why he was bothering to say anything. You could always savor his humiliation, like you did before. Parker was flying around the stadium, courtesy of a jetpack that was seemingly not under his control. Before I got my face nearly caved in by that green brat. I don't care about humiliation. Tamura began scratching at his neck with the forefinger of his other hand. I don't care about laughs or stupid comedy. I want him, no, I want them to suffer. I want them all to die, slowly and painfully, and knowing all the while that as they perish, and how there wasn't a single stupid thing they could do about it. His ruby orbs burned with fury as he said those words. No one to save the day. No one to give them hope. I understand, Tamura, replied Kurogiri, in as gentle a tone as he could manage. I understand completely. You know I do. The master had told him that Shigaraki would be in a tough spot after the USJ fiasco. The shame of losing a mid-end Namu crafted to kill All Might, slain by mere children, was hitting the youth hard. A crack reverberated throughout the bar, so loud and sudden that Kurogiri almost dropped the glass he was polishing. Tamura had slammed his fist down on the bar, his nearest eye turning to regard him with inhuman malice as he breathed hard. Bullshit. You don't understand me, Kurogiri. Don't pretend that you do. Tamura turned away from the TV, regarding him with both of those eyes, the eyes that would have terrified him if he was capable of normal human emotional responses. Having a gaseous form had more than a few advantages. The TV showed highlights of the prior events in detail, one being footage of Midoriya Izuku fighting Bakugo Katsuki in the war along with that frog girl, Asuitsuyu. Midoriya took father from me. Tamura jabbed an accusing finger at his bare face, where that particular hand should have been. He destroyed father's hand. Where the hell am I supposed to get another father's hand? He only had 2 to begin with. They don't grow on fucking trees. He pointed at the last hand, currently behind his head. The fingers scraping at his neck scratched harder and faster. I will never remember him again, Tamura went on, his eyes losing focus. Without his hand on my face, I'll forget what he looked like, what he felt like. His hand on my face, squeezing my face ... that has a lot of meaning for me. Kurogiri. My memories are in tatters, you know that. Kurogiri knew about that, of course. Tamura may not know this, but All for One had filled the Black Mist villain in the moment that he took the youth into his care. Tamura's father was a wealthy man, but an abusive fiend, hating all heroes and punishing his family if they so much as praised them. His young son especially, considering he looked up to All Might as a young child. Kurogiri would normally have considered taking care of a man-child with severe daddy issues to be intellectually beneath him. Nevertheless, Tamura was his job, his duty given to him by All for One, to help his master's protege grow. We'll get them, Tamura, he said mildly, when the time is right. Oh, we'll get them all right. Tamura turned back to the TV, muttering to himself as he glared. That fucking bug ... the slut. Midoriya. That blast psycho ... that pesky frog. The noisy cunt. And Endeavor's brat. He offered his hand, and Kurogiri reached down, pulling a glass and pouring some bourbon to slide over to the buzzed youth as he began to drink it down. He began tittering to himself, groaning as he again began to scratch his neck. Let him wallow and fester in his defeat, Kurogiri. It will make him all the more stronger the next time we make our move. All for One had told him. Every last one of them. I'll kill them all. Kurogiri took Shigaraki's empty glasses and returned to his normal spot, cleaning the bar's surface as the teal-haired youth cursed under his breath when Parker's match came to an end. You had no words as she walked through the grounds of the festival with Kamui in death arms. Her mouth was ajar as Kamui waved a hand in front of her. Is she gonna be okay? Shinji asked, turning towards his colleague. Considering how Parker looked and how much she was yelling, maybe she needs to take 5. The more muscular hero murmured under his breath as he saw you stagger in front of him. I'm fine, you uttered in monotone. Just fine. Before her face split and she began to crack, guffawing out loud. Oh man. Peter's face was hysterical. Ha 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 he. Oh, I need to find some screen caps to show him later. Oh, that would be a sight to remember as he wailed. She had taken him on the big-time roller coasters back in Universal Studios Japan, and Peter didn't even so much as look flustered. He enjoyed it, but she did want to see some terror on his face, just to sate her satisfaction a little. Not so loud, you're causing a scene, Shinji sternly commanded. Yu's shoulders slumped. Still, this should also be an important lesson for him going forward. I need to tell him not to believe everything your friends say. The blonde muttered under her breath before she looked up, before she grinned ear to ear. Aha, another cute college boy making taiyaki. She deserved some sweets for her hard work. Take Yama. No, Kamui commanded, before you looked back, grinning and giggling impishly before turning back towards the glasses-wearing taiyaki cashier. Oh Yuhu. She jumped over, putting just enough skip to make her girls bounce. Taiyaki sup on. The boy perked up, eyebrows rising. Oh, for crying out loud. Kamui groaned, hand to his wooden mask. Got him. Hook, line, and sinker. Can I have 2 oblongs please? 1 milk and strawberry and the other matcha and chocolate please. With custard filling too. Sure tea that would come to about 1500 yen though, Mount Lady-san. He was blushing as you had a hand grab her other arm, and her forearm pushed up against her very supple chest, and she wiggled that moneymaker that has earned her all her hardcore fans. Seeing his eyebrows light up made her giddy on the inside. Oh, I'm so sorry, she cooed softly, batting her eyelashes. I recognize your label right. Somi. Can I start a tab and pay you back later? She swayed a little side to side, seeing his eyes trail down to her hips, cheeks pink. Ayu, here we go. Time to reel him in. My costume doesn't leave much for me to carry a wallet. You won't let a pro faint from lack of strength on the job now, won't Yao? It's on the house, he exclaimed loudly, grinning dumbly. Haha, boys will be boys. Greatly appreciated. The blonde's seductive tone was gone, impish grin back in full force. Stop extorting the sponsors here, Takeyama. Shinji shook his fist as you looked back, pulling her eyelid down and sticking her tongue out as the boy got to work in a jiffy. It was great being a hero, Peter groaned as he walked back to his suite. He had to deliver the gear Hatsume gave him back in a box in the locker room that was labeled Hatsume's babies when he was done, as the pink-haired girl stated, and one of the support teacher's aides took the gear for her. The brown-haired boy could see the TVs in the hallways and the highlights of his match. I brought this on myself. Welp, least one of us had fun. he uttered, shrugging as he climbed the stairs back to the Class 1A suite. Peter had been hoping to have a nice fun match with Hatsume and help show off her babies. But no, she used him as a guinea pig while she played spokesperson for 10 whole minutes, putting his body through the ringer. It took longer than expected returning to his suite. Yeah, he was taking the long way and the stairs instead of the elevator. All of the eyes of his fellow members of Class 1 were upon him, their looks judging, shocked, and amused. Peter shrugged. Yeah, laugh it up. I walked into that one. Peter waved his hand, sighing as he heard Zero and Mina giggle up a storm. Gotta say, Ace, that was really unmanly of that girl to use you like that, Kirishima stated as Peter walked down his row, ignoring the burning glare from the blonde bomber and the annoyed stare from Todoroki. Yeah, I was surprised you accepted her offer so easily. You gonna be okay though, Parker-kun? Uraraka asked. Your hair is a bit messy. Peter looked up, hand patting his crown as he felt his brown hair all messy. Dang, should have brought a comb, he muttered, before he felt something in his hand, seeing Momo hand him said comb. Oh, thanks. Peter laughed a little, taking his seat. Well, you did end up winning in the end. Gee, that's all that matters at the end of the day, right? Izuku asked, trying his best to reassure the slumping American as he combed his hair. He is right, although your performance was. Momo blushed, biting her lower lip as Peter winced. Oh god, she laughed too. Unique. You still wound up advancing and caught your opponent by surprise in the end. So, you still earned your victory, she said with an awkward smile. Well, that's a positive way to put it, Peter uttered as he leaned forward in his seat. I'm making sure her babies aren't life-threatening next time. Oy vey, he groaned, stretching lightly. You going to be alright though? You look like you went through a washing machine, Kyoka asked with an amused smirk. Gotta say, the way you are screaming. She stifled a giggle, and Peter tilted his head and frowned. That too, Jiru Kyoka. I'm sorry, but man, it was so dorkish for you. Finally, I'm not the only dork in this class, Denki declared with relief. The punk-haired girl lazily looked back at the blonde. True, but you're the head dork, Kyoka stated flatly, causing Denki to gasp. How rude. To be fair though, we have a lot of dorks in this class. It's kinda funny that way. Mina giggled, hands behind her back as she grinned from ear to ear. Like Midoriya, Ida, Kaminari, Kirishima, and now Parker can join them now. Hey, I'm not a dork. I'm manly, Kirishima objected, pointing at his chest. The pinkette giggled impishly while Peter sighed. Midoriya shrunk a little at the mention of his name. I cannot be a dork. I am too shiny to be considered a fool, Aoyama added with his constant grin. Mina craned her head back to look at the French-Japanese boy. I dunno, you can be considered, what's the French word? Lamato, with that silly pose and stuff, Mina murmured before giggling, finger to her chin in thought. Aoyama blanched lightly. It is pronounced Lamat mon chéri. Keep your head up, Peter-san, Momo murmured, offering a small smile of sympathy. I mean, it was amusing, but in the end, you did win. That's what matters most. Although, she bit her lip in anxiousness. What is your history with that girl anyway? She seemed very close to your face and all. Yeah, you seeing a girl on us, Parker? Denki accused with a pointing finger, and Peter blanched. Wait, you mean me and Hatsume? It's not like that at all. He waved his hands in denial as he felt many eyes on him. She's very enthusiastic about her babies and doesn't know the concept of personal space. She is a friend though, he finished, uttering as he scratched his cheek a little. I did find it odd how she called her gadgets babies. Momo mused, hand to her chin. I heard rumors of a girl in the support course who was crazy but a very good inventor. Going by that, she coughed, noticing Peter biting his lower lip. Demonstration, she must have built quite a lot of support equipment. On to call her gadgets babies. Still, the sports festival is a way for one to sell themselves to the pros for internships. Izuku looked up from his notebook. I guess for those in the support course, instead of pro heroes she was looking at companies. I heard her say such things during the race. Same here. She went on and on about how the big companies should be looking at her babies when we fought together during the war. Uraraka waved her hand, eyes looking off in the distance. Guess everyone has to be recognized in their own way. She let out a sigh. Still, would have been nice to advance to the tournament. Hopefully there's some firms out there for me. Yeah, I guess so. And don't worry about it, Uraraka-san. I'm sure you'll get invites. Peter continued to comb his hair, patting down the brown locks to make for easier combing. Says Mr. Popular over here, Zero teased with a cheeky grin. Going by how social media sites have been going bananas over you, good luck managing your inbox. Peter looked up, seeing the social media, and he puckered his lips. He saw his name there, with plenty of laugh emojis and WWWs, which was Japanese for lol apparently in text speak. Don't remind me. Peter rolled his eyes. Was just having fun is all. He muttered under his breath in English as he could hear good-natured laughter behind him. In some ways, hearing some of the class laugh at him felt a bit familiar, like being at home. He looked back, seeing his classmates go back to socializing or keeping to themselves, most of them that is. Yet when some of them turned, they just smiled back. Not in jest or annoyance as it was back home in his world, but it was something else. In some ways, seeing some of their eyes reminded him of Ned when he looked at him. He smiled lightly, hands behind his head. Welp, it was as Momo said. Sure, he made a fool of himself, but this was a festival after all. They had some fun. He was back on his feet at 100%, and he had advanced to fight his next opponent. Just let it wash over him. Water under the bridge. Oh, next match is about to start. Peter perked up as he saw the Jumbotron. All-right, boys and girls, for this next match it couldn't get any more different in terms of styles. Present Mike declared as the two contestants walked into the ring. Peter noticed how Sato walked to the stadium, face stoic as he did his best to hide his nervousness from being in front of so many people. Beside him, hands in pockets, Shinso Hitoshi sauntered on in. From the hero course, you can tell this kid is bona fide hero material. With those muscles, you would be surprised to hear how much of a sweet tooth he has with that rock-hard physique. When it comes to overwhelming force, few can match him when he's on a sugar high. Give it up for Sato Rikido. The tall boy waved, patting his belt as he took his side of the field. That's where he keeps his sugar, right? Peter inquired. From what he remembered of the battle trials, Sato kept his sugar cubes in a utility belt for him to munch on. His quirk, Sugar Rush, allowed him to gain an incredible boost in power and speed when consuming sugar, at the cost of his intelligence depending on the amount. Looks like the same utility belt. Shinso's quirk is unknown at this point, and it's something we didn't see during the war or obstacle race. Midoriya mumbled as he wrote in his notebook. It has to be a stealth-related quirk of some kind, or maybe some quick strike one. Yet how did he end up in general studies? I don't understand, but it has to be something. Sato is fighting blind, but he has the edge in speed and power, but Shinso surely has to have the edge when it comes to. He rattled off as Peter leaned away from his green-haired friend as he looked up to Uraraka and Kirishima. The mumbles coming out of him was like a broken dam. The red-headed brawler shrugged, glancing at an annoyed Bakugo. Hey, Bakugo. He got the blonde's attention by his angry red eyes turning his way. He said nothing, but he had his attention. Peter jerked a thumb at Midoriya. Does he do this oft? All the time. Now shut up and focus on the match. Bakugo growled, eyes focusing back on the field. Peter scoffed, rolling his eyes. And this student came out of nowhere. From general studies, he is the ultimate enigma. This is the first time in a long while that a general studies student has made it this far. Present Mike hyped up. We will finally get to see him in action. Give a round of applause for Shinso Hitoshi. Sato, Peter yelled. Shinso, break a leg out there. He cheered, cupping his hands. Not rooting just for our class ace. Jiru asked with a smirk. Shinso was a teammate of ours. Plus he's cool in his own way. The American elaborated. Yeah, well, he did something to me that made me go at max charge. Denki wailed, waving his hand. Like I talked to him and my mind went blank. Before I knew it, I had discharged all over the place and I lost my band. The blonde electric user pouted. Did he just say that? Peter looked back, eyebrow quirked. There was silence at first. Then Kyoka snorted, as did Siro and Mina as they sniggered to themselves. Bakugo rolled his eyes before Denki realized his error. I didn't mean to say it like that. I meant go. Stupid. Kyoka finished for him before the majority of the class all had a laugh. Koda patted the poor boy's shoulder in assurance as he slumped to the ground. Wait, so Shinso's quirk has to do with you talking to him? Weird. Peter murmured, turning his attention towards the match in particular. Are you sure it's related to sound? Midoriya inquired. For all we know, you could have locked eyes or something. Well, we are about to find out. Momo added as Cementos explained to them the rules and went back to his chair. The stars were aligning, and Hitoshi was feeling blessed. He sauntered into the arena, staring at the big-lipped muscular brute of a boy standing across from him, hand on his utility belt as Cementos walked back to his seat. He smirked, looking at the Jumbotron. All he had to do was have Sato reply once, and it'd be game over. Then his next opponent would be Parker, and from what he had seen the boy seemed like a chatterbox. Couldn't keep silent. That would put him into the final four of the tournament. He would finally get a spot in the hero course for sure. The faculty would be fools to not demote an undeserving student for one as worthy as he. This dumb muscular fool will be his first sacrifice towards that goal. Gotta say, did you inherit your lips from your mom? They can be seen from space. Hitoshi smirked as Midnight lifted her bullwhip. Begin. Now come on, talk back. Sato didn't, reaching into his belt, pulling out some sugar cubes and placing them in his mouth, swallowing them. His muscles bulged, eyes widening out as he yelled in masculine fury. And that hair, good God, and I thought I had bed. He paused as Sato was charging. Hitoshi's heart stopped, his blood chilling. Rah-hug, Sato roared, grabbing the purple-haired boy and still running towards the other end of the arena. What the hell? Put me down, you lumox. Let me go. He hit and bashed the brown-haired hunk of muscle as Sato continued to roar like some dumb animal, and he leapt up in the air, going spread eagle as Hitoshi was under him. Sato I am. He yelled, wait, with his position. He was gonna touch the ground first, not this sugar-addicted buffoon. Shit. Hitoshi wailed, and Sato came down hard, using Shinso as a buffer between him and the ground. He felt all the air exit his lungs as Hitoshi gasped and yelled in pain, his bones creaking as Sato leapt to his feet. Puny Gened. Sato slurred, walking away. Hitoshi groaned as he did his best to get air back in his lungs. That was fast. Midnight uttered. Well, Shinso touched the ground first. The winner by ring out is Sato Rikido. Sato walked back to the tunnel, and Hitoshi just tried to focus on breathing, even as medical bots came to place him on a stretcher. Okay, maybe he wasn't ready for the hero course just yet. Well, that was quick, Peter uttered, blinking before smiling. Way to go, Sato. Woo. He waved. But how? How did Sato not go blank like I did? Denki asked, face in utter bewilderment. Well, Sato just went plus ultra in his own way. Asui mused, looking back at the blonde who wanted answers for his latest humiliation. He went straight to the point and just got down to business. First strike victories seemed to be a recurring theme this year. Takoyami muttered for the first time, arms crossed as his head hung low. You're not wrong, Todoroki replied, focusing back on the Jumbotron as Sato's icon advanced to the Elite Eight. Peter turned back as well, seeing that his future opponent was Sato. Oh, I'll be facing him in the next round. He saw Momo climb to her feet, face set in determination as the Jumbotron screen pivoted to the next match. Yaoyorozu Momo vs Shizaki Ibara. I'm going to get ready. Wish me luck, everyone, she said, face focused as Peter gave a thumbs up. You can do it, Momo-san. He beamed, the girl's eyes softening a bit as she smiled. Do your best, class rep. Asui waved giddily. Good luck down there, Kyoka added as she leaned back, seeing Momo walk out of the suite. As he turned back to face the stadium, he noticed Mina frowning lightly. Something up, Mina-san? He inquired, and the pinkette focused on him with her dark and gold eyes. I worked with Shizaki during the War of the Flags, and we didn't see her fight but her quirk. She bit her lip in concern, eyes looking to the side. What about it? Izuku asked, reaching down to sip on his drink. Yaoyorozu's gonna lose. Simple as that. Bakugo broke in, and everyone's eyes were on him. Midoriya on the other hand spat out his drink, head whipping around as if his childhood friend had grown an extra head and was in a tutu. You don't know that, Peter replied, voice becoming sterner as his chocolate eyes were locked in by the blonde bomber's ruby red ones. Just watch Parker, you'll see. The American narrowed his eyes, the two of them silent as Peter focused back on the arena. Kaken called Yaoyorozu-san by her name. Midoriya spoke to himself, and Parker as well. Takoyami added, eyes closed as he continued to relax. Midoriya's eyes widened, going from the raven-headed boy to Peter. The American felt his gaze upon him. Something up, Midori? Peter asked, seeing those green eyes of his searching. For what? He didn't know. It's nothing. Izuku slumped in his seat, grabbing his notebook and his pen as he began to write, looking down for whatever reason. Options. The one thing that her quirk excelled at was giving her options. The creation of whatever non-living object that she wished was near the most versatile quirk ever recorded. In her case, the one limit was that Momo needed to know the inner workings of whatever she wanted to create. Amazingly, that kind of barrier was almost effortless to climb over. All she needed was to conduct research, study, and memorize whatever items she needed to create. From a young age, her parents and her peers praised her, called her things like prodigy, genius, and a dozen other variations. It went so far as her father seemingly pulling a recommendation to UA out of thin air. Though she had no doubt that the Yaoyorozu name carried much weight with the staff of UA, the fact that they allowed her in at all astounded her. After all, compared to her peers, despite all the versatility that her quirk allowed, didn't compare to those around her. No matter what she came up with, she couldn't dabble in their worlds nearly as fast. How many could break down walls, stop falling buildings, unleash elements, or maneuver themselves at superhuman levels better than she could? A name and face appeared to answer each question. with a few notable ones filling up her own class roster. Yet, in the case of her opponent, Momo couldn't be sure. From what she remembered, Shizaki was capable of utilizing vines in some minor sort of chlorokinesis. She'd seen the vines completely cover the giant boulders Uraraka set up around the Blue King ring of the enemy faction on the Jumbotron, which no doubt proved difficult to infiltrate for those that had to go up against it. Since Honuki couldn't slink in from underneath, it meant that Shizaki had also strengthened her vines to the point of piercing topsoil at the very least. Fire seemed like the best and most immediate choice to combat the first volley. If Momo could burn the vines faster than her opponent could replace them, then she would have a chance to wring her out with a concussive shot or incapacitating her with Parker's web fluid. Another option was producing a chainsaw, but again, an item like that would need time to create. At the most, 10 seconds. Shizaki wasn't stupid. That being said, that was a rather large if. Momo wasn't allowed to make anything until the match started, leaving her without precious time to create anything with her quirk. Her opponent, she had no such limitations. She needed to think, find the one thing that could give her time. Her mind raced with formulas and devices that she'd memorized years ago, trying to find something that would give her an advantage even as her legs brought her closer and closer to the arena. Oh boy, I hope you're ready, ladies and gentlemen, because we've got our first taste of Class A versus Class B amongst the first years coming right up. And trust me, there is a big-time rivalry here. Present Mike declared as Momo took her spot in her corner. Her opponent stared into the distance from the other side, not even looking at Momo before folding her hands in some sort of prayer. In the East, she's the brains of Class 1A, the representative with everything and the kitchen sink ready to be shot out of her fingertips. From the hero course, Yaoyorozu Momo. At the roar of the crowd, Momo couldn't help but feel a tiny bit embarrassed at the noise. Most of it was probably for courtesy, same as the rest of her classmates, but she did smile a bit. However, the second that the sound reached its high points, her opponent stopped her silent prayer, opening her eyes. And in the West, the guardian angel of the hero course's Class 1B, she's the green thumb that will raise you up and bring you down. From the hero course, it's SHIOZAKIIBARA. Another wave of excitement, and Cementos lowered himself from his self-made judge's chair to convey to the two girls the standard rules of engagement. Nothing extreme or else they would risk dequalification. A rebellious part of her mind wondered if it was to support the atmosphere of the competition, play the crowd and create a greater show for the investing heroes. Momo silenced the thought, putting everything that she had in the few remaining seconds. There had to be a limit on Shizaki's vines, but what it was Momo could only guess. It could be enough to cover a house, or as large as filling the entire stadium with greenery. Quirks allowed for any level of power to be possible, so Momo could only hope that she had a small limit. In that case, she would need something like a napalm charge, blanketing the area in enough flames to keep the vines at bay. However, a defense like that was liable to be thrown back in her face. Even if she could get it out, there was no guarantee that she wouldn't get the burning liquid on her, or even if she would be able to function afterwards from the heat. Even in the best-case scenario, napalm or a similar substance thrown around her would deter the vines easily enough. But again, the speed of her creation versus the speed of Shizaki's quirk. How fast were the vines? She could make a machete for starting defense. That wouldn't take much more than a thought to conjure. The charge, longer, but in the meantime she could cut what came close while trying to close the distance if all else failed. No, the best and safest option would be a machete. Kamakiri and Kaibara were able to cause some damage against Shizaki during the war with their bladed quirks. Machete for defense, then web paintball rifle to finish her off the second she got close. Momo tensed her legs, mentally running through the ratios for steel and picturing the design of a blade. Cementos looked at her, and she nodded in confirmation, and Shizaki did the same from her end, arms still held together. Convinced, the proctor went back to his chair as Miss Midnight came forward. Momo took a deep breath, calming her nerves, watching every flick of Midnight's bullwhip as it went up, while doing everything she could to see her opponent. Shizaki was staring right back at her, or more accurately, her feet. Momo would take off running first, then fight against whatever plan that Ibara might be concocting on her end to give herself a little more time. The bullwhip was held at arm's length. Let the seventh match, then it came down, begin. Momo took off in a sprint, zigzagging and staying on the balls of her feet as the machete popped out of her arm in a multicolored aura. She took hold of the handle right before the first few vines surged at her. Momo swiped with the blade, cutting through the green tendrils with ease. But with each one that she cut, 4 more took their place. The class rep found herself all but flailing her arm at the oncoming horde as Shizaki didn't even budge from her spot, face set in stone. During another precious second, Momo ran through the schematics to build another machete. Then the vine-haired girl raised her hand, and the ground underneath Momo split open. It was too surreal to explain. One moment she was on solid ground, the next something pushed from underneath her like some unearthly seismic event, making her yell out. From the broken cement, vines, dozens more than what came at her originally shot out and wrapped around Momo. She was jerked into the air, her temporary weapon clattering to the ground, her arms bound against her and held there by thick green tendrils. Not even a second later, the vines moved her to the side, throwing her how one would lazily toss a ball. Momo barely managed to catch herself when she hit the ground, rolling into a heap as she grunted. The ground, a good 2 meters outside of the arena. In her corner, Ibara breathed a sigh of relief and Momo heard the words she was dreading as she hung her head. Yaoyorozu is out of bounds. Shizaki advances to the second round. For what felt like the 1000th time today, the crowd explodes in a chorus of shouts. Momo felt a million times heavier picking herself back up. The outcome? It was understandable. There were too many variables that had presented themselves and Shizaki's quirk was overwhelming. She would have needed more time to conjure up something more substantial. No matter the variable, it all came back to that. And there you have it, Katsuki drawled, leaning back against his seat as he saw Frog and Punk Girl get up and head out of the suite. Next to him, a few of the extras in his class were still in a state of disbelief. The blonde bomber let out a scoff. TCH, amateurs, what did they think was going to happen? That Yaoyorozu was just going to pull out a bomb and force the vine chick to surrender. No, Katsuki never interacted with her during the war, but he had eyes like everyone else and used them. Vine Girl had 4 eyes surrounded in so many vines on top of the boulders Dollface moved around that the king ring might as well have been a bunker. Yaoyorozu was good, one of the worst people to fight if she had time to prepare. He knew that firsthand. But you don't pull out a Swiss Army knife against a bulldozer. From the highlights of the race, that was exactly what Vine Girl was too. Yaoyorozu lasted longer than Katsuki expected. Had to give her a little credit for that. The rich girl should have made some defensive item of sorts for her feet first instead of trying to rush in. Though she'd need time for that, something that the vine chick wouldn't give her. All in all, it was a lose-lose situation no matter what she did. In a way, Katsuki saw himself in the Vine Girl and Birdbrain and Yaoyorozu. Bad matchups, not much in the way of warm-ups. Looking over, Parker caught his glare. Guy was wrestling with his hands. If he was trying to act like the guy that always believed in his friends for no other reason than they were friends or some other crap, then he was being a dumbass about it. Anyone with eyes could tell that he had come to the same conclusion that Bakugo did, as much as he hated to admit. Man, kinda feel sorry for Yaoyorozu. She didn't even get anything cool out, Edgehair said. It was going to be hard, Dollface said. It was a bad matchup from the start, but I really thought she could pull it off. Guess even our class rep isn't infallible, huh? Parker looked down, even Icy Hot sighed in admittance. 2 of them admitted it, but Yaoyorozu-san is impressive, but Shizaki is a strong opponent who placed 4th in the entrance exam. But Vines, huh? I wonder if it's like Kamui Wood's quirk. Oh, got him it Deku. The range capability seemed to be larger than the arena, allowing for at least 30 meters of range. Blinding types are really strong, and they would need impressive strength or tools to break out, so I doubt many will be able to do it. Wait, but in order to do that, she would have to go for your head first. You'd need to get in close enough, fast enough that she couldn't bind you. Katsuki gritted his teeth. He didn't need Deku's mumblestorm coming down on him like hail when he had to think of a strategy to counter Horngirl. Fucking nerd. Oh wow, he's passionate, Pink commented. Yeah, that's cool, but how does he breathe? Parker asked. He talked nonstop for like half a minute. He's still muttering, Birdbrain corrected. Wow Deku, I didn't know you were so invested in quirks, Dollface stated. Thankfully, cause Deku somehow had less self-respect around girls than anything else that came his way, the comment knocked him out of it. Oh yeah, it's nothing but a hobby. Hey man, don't worry about it, Parker said, slapping that snake on the back and nearly causing the damn nerd to drop that stupid book of his. Pretty sure no one is going to rag on you for geeking about superpowers. It sounds more like counter strategies to me, Dollface stated for the class. Deku is smart that way, always planning ahead. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Hey, it's nothing. I've got a ton of notes on the rest of Class 1A. I've even got. And that's all that Katsuki was going to deal with. Deku and Dollface could go on and on about the useless crap while Bakugo got some shut-eye. His next round was against Horngirl. Had to focus on that, prepare counters. Remember her movements back during the race and the match against Orange. The entire stadium sounded like a full-on rock concert. Strange as it was for most people to think about, it actually helped Kyoka out. All of the sound, the roaring, it reminded her of all those music festivals that her parents took her to when she was a kid. Wasn't much, but anything to stop that annoying twitch of nerves was a godsend right now. Though, given how easily Asui was climbing the stairs to the arena, the atmosphere wasn't really getting her down too much. Or it was. Kyoka could never read her classmate very well anyway. She was pretty neutral even at the worst of times. Girl went through the USJ without even blinking from what Kyoka could see or remember most of the time. However, Kyoka's thoughts were cut off as the static of her English teacher exploded through the speakers for the millionth time today. She hoped that Mr. Aizawa had invested in some really good earplugs. Alright dear listeners, we've got one more match for the first round. Are you ready? Present Mike asked, and through the Jumbotron, Jiru could see him beckon the crowd with a wave of his hands, doing his best to put that radio show DJ gig of his to good use. And of course, like all successful DJs, the crowd ate it up, and Jiru had to resist the urge to roll her eyes. Yeah, it was for the show, but the people knew what they were getting into. Across the arena, Asui rolled her eyes, sharing Kyoka's annoyance. That response made the violet-haired girl smirk a little. At least they thought alike, if only for something as mundane as this. In the red corner, we've got the rock and roll jamming bass bringing girl that knows the power of sound like yours truly. From the hero course, it's JIROUKYOKA. You're not supposed to be biased, Mr. Aizawa grumbled, his voice somehow making it through the chorus of the crowd. Jiru rolled her eyes. That hype was like 5 out of 10 at best. He did have to make those up on the spot, but come on man, her parents were watching. And in the blue corner, a hop, skip, and a jump straight to victory, the wide-eyed student with the flippers to swim through it all. From the hero course, Asui Tsuyu. Across from her, Asui blinked once, accepted whatever the heck that was, and loosened her arms with a quick shudder of his shoulders. Alright, Mr. Cementa started. Standard tournament rules apply. Are there any questions on the rules from either side? Got one, Jiru said while raising her hands. Are my boots still good to go? She asked, tapping the thick soles with her jacks. Cementos didn't answer, referring to Midnight with a quick glance. The heroine snapped a pose with her whip, because of course she had to, and smiled a grin that probably got her plenty of modeling opportunities back in the day. Could have been yesterday for all Kyoka knew, but right now she was starting to see what Tokoyami was getting on about. Yes, you've filled out the required paperwork, so anything you bring is yours to command. Do give a show. Isn't that the point of this festival? Kyoka asked, sarcasm dripping off every word. Oh, just play for the cameras, Midnight grumbled with a wave of her bullwhip. Like the one right there, Asui asked, pointing at the Jumbotron. You girls ready to fight or not? Midnight asked, arms crossing over her bust in annoyance. Kyoka's smirk fell off her face, the seriousness of the situation effortlessly taking over. She immediately put her jacks into her boots, prepping the bass drop. Asui dropped to all fours, wide eyes focused on her. Both of these actions were enough of a signal. The final match of the first round begins. The air was filled with the sound of the cracking whip, only for every decibel of that sound to get drowned out by Kyoka's sound waves. Ripping sound shook the air in front of her like a directional heat haze. Now, Asui was fast, but sound itself was a barrier that she would probably never be able to break no matter how much hopping power her quirk gave her. Having said that, she didn't need to do that, hopping to the right and away from the directional charge. Kyoka adjusted the shot, funneling all the bass she could at her classmate, but Asui was already jumping away. Right at Kyoka. Ribbit. The frog girl's tongue flew out of her mouth like a bullet, but one of Kyoka's jacks rose up to meet it, electricity sparking off the tips. Asui pulled her tongue back and the punk girl leapt to the side for all that she was worth, avoiding her opponent's tackle. Plugging her jacks back into her boots, Kyoka turned and fired. But Asui was always the most nimble in their class outside of Parker, Midoriya as of today, Ashido, and Bakugo. The frog girl turned on a dime, whipping out her tongue, latching it onto a tile and pulling herself away so only a second of the blast hit her. It was honestly amazing to see Asui zip over the field, bouncing off the arena the instant her tongue ran out of length. Kyoka snapped her head skyward just in time to see Asui's tongue hit a few feet behind her, just out of reach of her jacks. With a pull that turned gravity into a weapon, Asui came down like a frog meteor. Kyoka dove to the right for all she was worth yet again, Asui's webbed feet passing an inch over her head. The punk girl hit the ground hard, but she grit her teeth and forced herself to watch her classmate. This close, Asui's leg reared back for a kick, but Jiru lashed out with her jacks. Asui dodged back with her good leg, avoiding the swipe with plenty of room to spare. Damn it, if only she was closer. A good shock on Asui's tongue had to be enough to finish this. But the girl didn't even let Kyoka breathe. Asui bent down on all fours and hopped, blurring across the top of the arena. Jiru blasted the arena with sound. It had to be doing something. Just a long enough blast hitting her had to slow her down. Yet Asui didn't stop, jumping around, to the side, behind her, circling her with a speed that Kyoka didn't know she could reach. 1 second she was on Kyoka's left, then her right. The punk girl could only blast in the small areas she could to dissuade the girl from trying to get close and wearing her down. Then, suddenly, Asui launched herself straight at her. Kyoka went to the side, as far as she could, and her jacks tried to hit the girl's flank but only hit open air where she'd been. There was a tug, and out of the corner of her eye, Kyoka saw Asui trailing her tongue behind her as she shot past. It had latched onto her leg. TCH. Kyoka threw both jacks at the appendage, but Asui pulled and the punk girl's legs went out from under her. She had maybe half a second before stars filled her vision, hitting her head against her arm in a vain attempt to minimize damage. Her head beat like a snare drum, but nothing could disguise the feeling of surprise from something dragging her back. Kyoka launched her jacks into the ground, but that only carved 2 lines in the concrete as she was pulled along. A quick jerk pulled her off the ground, into the air, and the next thing Kyoka knew, she was sprawling through the grass on the outside of the ring. Oh, she's gonna feel that for the rest of the day. Jiru is out of bounds. Asui Tsuyu is heading to the next round. Midnight declared. Again, the blast of noise came down, but it didn't help this time. Dragging herself up, Kyoka couldn't help but wince. Her jacks burned and her ears felt like they had nearly been torn off. Glancing back, the punk girl saw her classmate gaze at her jacks with concern. Putting on her best face, Kyoka gave her a thumbs up and a congratulatory smile. There was a little part of her that was bitter that she couldn't get further. But on the plus side, no possibility of fighting Shizaki or Parker. Plus she did put on a good show in the war. Hopefully, she'd take a good show over that any day of the week. And there we have it, folks. The first round is in the books. Present Mike declared as the Jumbotron displayed Tsuyu advancing. Here is your Levelite 8. Bakugo Katsuki vs Pony Tsunotori. Midoriya Izuku vs Todoroki Shoto. Peter Parker vs Rikido Sato. Asui Tsuyubs. Shizaki Ibara. So, that is the next round, Midoriya stated, gazing at the brackets. Todoroki, and possibly Kaken in the semi-final. Peter said nothing, taking a deep breath as he looked back, already seeing Bakugo walk off with his hands in his pockets. He saw his red eyes look down, and Peter stared back. Bakugo glared, and Peter found himself returning the glare back as Bakugo left the aisle and entered the tunnel. Peter found himself exhaling and standing up, walking past Momo and Midoriya over to the wall Monoma leered over from. Gazing out over the ledge, he heard cheers and calls of support for Pony from the Class 1B suite. He looked over, seeing Pony walk off, head turned as she marched out. He could see some of the students from Class 1B like Kamakiri and Kiriwaro turn back, with Kendo having not turned around her body at all, staring right at him. Peter went back down, taking his seat and inhaling a deep breath as he felt a knot form in his chest. In the time he had known Bakugo, the impression he'd gained painted Midoriya's childhood bully as a jerk, at least until Bakugo's image evolved into a straight-up thug. All Might was a great hero, a good person, yet the fact remained that no one had brought up the battle trials results from back then. Irked him. Mr. Stark would have stripped everything from him and never give it back to him if he pulled such a stunt, and nothing short of helping against Mr. Toombs 1,000 times over would change things. And Peter knew that Tony Stark wasn't a saint. Before he became Iron Man, he wasn't that good of a guy. Heck, the man even said it himself back on the rooftop on the day of the ferry. But still, even he, at his lowest point, wouldn't let something like that happen. Except, he wasn't here. All Might was here. And Peter could only watch as his friend was hyped up by Present Mike before the next match as highlights of the two competitors were being shown on the Jumbotron. His nerves were on fire. He couldn't stop tapping his foot. Bakugo was good, there was no denying that. But Pony had come so far from the time he'd met her back in language classes a year ago. His first friend in this new world. Win, Pony, he muttered, closing his eyes. He doesn't deserve it. You do, he whispered in English. Peter-san, Momo asked as Peter leaned back. He turned back, offering a smile. Hey, so, you excited for the big match? Midoriya heard his question to Momo and turned towards Peter. Yeah, it will be an interesting fight, he exclaimed with a smile, grabbing his pen as he began another mumblestorm. Tsunotori-san can fly and use her horns as projectiles. She also has good mobility on the ground too, what with her horse or bull-like characteristics as we saw in her fight against Kendo. But the question is, Peter tuned him out, trying to ignore the pit in his stomach as he looked around. This was a festival, meant for the students to have a good time and have fun while getting some recruitment offers from hero agencies in the process. Bakugo didn't seem like the guy who would have a good time. Here's here to win. Take no prisoners. Hell, even Flash knew how to do that. And the times when he rubbed his assumed superiority in everyone's faces could be funny. Plus, he tended to suffer from the effects of bad karma, like that time back when he and Ned were kids. Flash had boasted about his science project volcano that had the best materials money could buy. It had ended up exploding, smothering him and his butler in baking soda. He and Aunt May got second place that day. Bakugo seems like. Peter shook his head, pushing the image of that piss ant for the memory of his loved ones. He let out a sigh. As much as this world has given him, I miss them, he muttered in English, ignoring the concerned look that Momo was giving him as he looked down at the arena, anxious for the upcoming fight, and the void in his heart aching. Oops, no music. Couldn't really find a place for that. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 10. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.